It's that time of the week. Yes, this week's Cult Movie Show, your weekly look at cult movies. Please welcome your hosts, Warren and Velvet.
Yes, welcome to another podcast of the Cult Movie Show with myself, Warren, and as always, the amazing Velvet. How are you today, Velvet?
I'm doing quite fantastic. We're all in working order. We can hear each other. It's a good day.
Second time's always best, isn't
it? Best for podcasting when people can hear us recording. But all joking aside, we got a really cool show lined up today. We're doing something we have not done before, and that is we're actually re-reviewing a couple of films that we've previously reviewed. And we want to do this to take a deeper dive on these films, but we also are doing full-on spoilers. So this is, yes, the spoiler episode for films that we've already reviewed. Because, sometimes you don't get to say everything you want to say the first time around. And I think this was a great idea that Warren had. So what do you think, Warren?
Well, yes, it was a little bit like we've had some movies from quite a while back, and
yes.
And we just sort of thought, well, let's just revisit them, talk about them again, because maybe we didn't talk about them enough, or maybe we have sort of rethought our thoughts about them, or, just various different reasons. So we've got 3 good ones lined up, I think anyway.
Definitely. Oh, my goodness. And we are going to tell you the episode number for each one in case you've not heard the initial review and you don't want to be spoiled, but you still like a little bit of a rundown of the film. I'll be sure before each film to give you the actual episode number from our archive so you can check out the review. Or if you listen to this one and you want to hear the original review, you can do that too. So
yes, it'd be interesting to see what the scores are like. Whether we rate them the same, that would be pretty. Ooh. That'll be pretty interesting, actually.
Yes,
I have a sneaking suspicion that I will not rate them the same. I don't know, but we will see. But before we get started, have you seen any good movies lately, Velvet?
Oh, my goodness. Always nowadays. I really make it a priority to get into that movie theater and see those movies. One I saw actually just yesterday, which I had so much fun. It's just so over the top. It's so wrong, but it was so fun. It was called Superfly. And it is just that story of, a drug dealer that wants to get out, but he's making multi-millions, and he's dealing with, cartels in Mexico, and he's dealing with competing drug dealers. I mean, it's one of those movies where, okay, this guy seems like a nice dude, but you're not showing the side of the consequences of what he's selling. He's not, you're flooding the streets with cocaine. You're not showing all the people that are addicted to cocaine, that are doing bad things to feed their addiction. So it's that crazy thing where they're glamorizing this highly illegal lifestyle. There was kung fu fighting, there was, explosions and fast cars and sexy women. It was so fun. But I'm like, wait, I shouldn't like this movie. This is glamorizing this horrible lifestyle. But, it's such a fun movie. It's worth checking out. It's definitely one of those films where you're totally the entire time rooting for the bad guy, which evidently I like those kind of films because one of the movies we'll be re-reviewing today, every single person in that movie is an anti-hero. So yes. It's called Superfly. So that was a lot of fun.
I was just going to ask, is it a bit like the British film Layer Cake?
I have never seen Layer Cake, so I can't tell you, but I believe they're that type of same genre.
Right, okay.
I think it's that same genre. I saw the biopic, I guess you'd call it a biopic, Adrift, about the woman that, her and her fiance are on a ship at sea and they get blown out in the middle of the ocean and they are stranded adrift for 41 Days. Very powerful film, scares the shit out of me. I think the ocean is so horrific. It's just so big and deep and endless. And if you get lost out there, you're probably going to die. But this was a survival story worth checking out. Very beautifully shot. And let me just say this movie is not as predictable as it sounds. They did a really excellent job with the trailer, making you think that the movie is one way, and then you go watch the movie and you're like, oh wow, there's more stuff going on here that I didn't expect, and really great. This one kind of came out of nowhere, and it's getting really bad reviews, but I liked it. This one is Gotti. Yes, we have John Travolta playing John Gotti. Yes, the famous American crime lord that he's really considered a public hero in his hometown, which is interesting. And I think one of the main reasons was, even though he was, a big time mobster and, headed this organized crime, he didn't sell drugs. So a lot of people say he actually cleaned up the streets when he was doing crimes, because he was like constantly killing people, but he's killing like rival people, and he's keeping drugs off the streets. And it's honestly, a lot of the acting in the movie is really spotty, not going to lie. But John Travolta, surprisingly, is spot on as John Gotti. I like John Travolta, but I've never thought that he's a good actor. He's just one of those guys.
Yeah,
he's iconic. Yeah, he's iconic, but he's not good. In this movie, in Gotti, John Travolta's actually good. I actually forgot that it was John Travolta through the movie. Like, he did such a spot on, I guess I almost want to say impersonation of John Gotti. So, and it's interesting because this movie was actually financed by a Movie Pass. For those of you familiar or not familiar with Movie Pass, it's a program in the United States where you pay basically $10 a month, and you can go to all the movies you want to see for an entire year for $10 a month. So they actually pulled all this money together and made this movie Gotti with John Travolta in it. So it's interesting. So they're kind of doing the Netflix thing, where Netflix is making a lot of their own movies. Now this Movie Pass is getting in on the game. So that's interesting.
Well, just for 30 seconds or less for non-American listeners, who was John Gotti? Just so people get an idea of what you're talking about.
There you go. And I'll say that one more time. John Gotti was basically an Italian-American gangster who became the crime boss of the Gambino crime family in New York. He died in 2002. He was buried in a gold casket. He actually died in prison of cancer. But yeah, he was this notorious crime boss. Like, he was constantly killing people. He was constantly going to trial, and he would always get off. He would never go to prison. They used to call him the Teflon Don, until of course they finally got him on something. Right. One of the people in his family turned informant, and that's really what put the nail in the coffin. And that's when the Teflon finally wore off, and he died basically in prison. But he was basically considered a neighborhood hero, which was interesting. I mean, when he died and they were driving his casket, to the funeral, the streets were lined with the people of the city, praying and saluting, and it was just it's really interesting that a crime boss has that much respect in his hometown. And people are like, yeah, he was a criminal, but he kept the streets clean. It's a very weird, strange.
It does happen. In Australia, a couple of years ago, there was a crime figure called Chopper Reed, and he died of cancer, and he was a lifelong standover man and murderer, for what Americans would call the mob, but basically, and killed so many people. Mind you, everyone he killed was a criminal, but but when he died, there was almost like this outpouring of we've lost an icon.
It's crazy.
Really, really interesting. Yeah, interesting the way that happens, actually. Yeah, so I'd be interested to see that movie, Velvet. That sounds really interesting, actually.
And I have to admit, though, I'm not a big history buff. I'm always kind of like, what's going on? And this movie is definitely for people who are familiar with the history of John Gotti. It goes very fast. I mean, they do constantly flash the dates and times and locations, and they give you the names of the people on the screen. But I'm always kind of like, okay, that's nice to know, but I don't really know what that means because I'm not fully fluent with the history of John Gotti. So it's definitely more for people who are in to the history of these famous criminals. But even on a just academic, if you know nothing level, it's still fun to watch. I really was totally entertained and actually impressed by John Travolta's performance in this film. I literally forgot it was John Travolta throughout the film because I was just like, wow. I was like, he's actually nailing all the mannerisms, the speech patterns. I mean, seriously. Yeah, it's a fun movie. I like it, actually. But,
excellent.
But the guy who played his son, though, there were some fucking scenes where it just sounded like he was reading off a teleprompter. I was just like, I don't know if it's just that John Travolta's so fucking good in this movie that's making the other guy look bad. I was just like, I don't know. So there is some spotty acting in it where some people are just like, either they didn't have their lines memorized. I don't know. But he was good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I must admit, I have been playing catch-up cinema, as I often do. And I finally got to see a movie which I've been wanting to see for a while, The Circle, with Tom Hanks. And
I know what you're talking about.
Yes, really, really interesting film. If you haven't seen it,
did you like it?
I thought it was a bit simplistic. Was the only criticism I would have. I thought everybody seemed to just accept what was going on a little bit too easily, I thought. I mean, I know people often, sort of say that, the great masses are just sheep. They'll be led by, and go along with anything. But I sort of thought, no, these people are just a bit too sheepish. They're just going along with absolutely everything without question. It was, yeah, but I have to admit, I really enjoyed it, and it's got a really interesting point, about social media, not just social media, but also the way that our lives are now lived so much online that what level of privacy do we actually have anymore? And in the future, are we going to literally get to a stage where there is no privacy at all? Everything is basically run by private organizations who, it's a little bit like, I mean, even in the movie, they get to the stage where they're going to try to take over how elections are run, and that elections will be run through your social media page, right? Now, the whole point about that is that, well, and they never bring this up in the movie, but that would mean that they would know how you vote. It would take all the secrecy out of voting. Now, that's like taking the world back 300 years, not moving forward. So it's a really interesting movie, and I thought they had so many interesting things to bring up, to talk about the modern world, and then just treated it in such a blasé, simplistic way. I thought it let the movie down. I think it would have actually been a much better story told as a mini-series, where it could have been told over 8 hours rather than just an hour and a half. But still, I reckon worth seeing.
Ugh, I've heard so many bad reviews of that movie, but if you're saying check it out, I trust your opinion, so I'll definitely check it out, because I kind of wanted to see it, because it had a lot of big stars in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but every review I heard, they were just like, oh my God, it's so bad.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, maybe I won't then.
It's too simple. They're taking really, really complicated issues about personal privacy and just simplifying it so much that it's that is a real letdown. But look, I'm not going to say it was ever Oscar material, but I would say it's probably worth checking out.
Right on.
It's a Netflix film, put it that way. Not, I wouldn't pay money to rent it. So.
Fair enough.
So anyway. So that's good. So well, I suppose we should start to delve into the world of cults with our 3 movies then, maybe.
Definitely. Absolutely. All right, Warriors, come out to play.
Yes.
There, I spared you so you don't have to do it.
Our first movie is The Warriors from 1979, the American cult classic, directed by Walter Hill. And this is a movie that was actually highly successful, but also sort of has gone into cult status, you would say, afterwards. And it is a movie that generally gets very good reviews. People who see it like it. I will say that, once again, a bit like I was saying with The Circle, maybe a little bit too simplistic and even childlike in some ways they deal, with certain issues. But it's still a film that's got a lot of respect and is really, really loved. I think, would that be a fair thing to say?
Absolutely, definitely. Super iconic film. Like when I do the either "Can you dig it?" or "Warriors, come out to play." I mean, it's a highly quotable movie. There's lots of great lines in the movie, which
oh yes.
It's such a cult favorite. Like I mentioned in the last review, this was turned into a full-on video game, and a lot of people were like, "What the hell is this? Like, this game's cool," and they're like, "There's a movie?" And so, like, it introduced a whole new generation to this movie, and now it just lives on.
It does, and the movie itself was actually taken from a book too. Is that right? I believe
that is correct. It is based on a book, and I originally wanted to read the book, and from what I heard, this book is like ridiculously graphic. There's a rape scene. There's a gang rape scene in which a woman is being raped on top of somebody's corpse, and I believe it's a headless corpse. So I'm just like, damn. I'm glad they didn't put that in the movie.
No, they definitely toned it down, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely. So evidently the book was ultra violence. And I'm just like, usually I'm pretty morbidly curious, but that one I'm like, oh, you know what? I like this movie so much, I think I'll pass on the book.
Yes. Well, I suppose, should we give people a very quick rundown? Just because obviously this is a re-looking, so we've already gone through it before. But the really quick rundown is that basically it is set in New York City. Now, would you say it's set in the future, or is it just not meant? It's meant to be timeless.
I think at the time it was considered what I like to call near future.
Near future,
so it's like it's near future. It's something that could happen, because I mean there have been times in lots of societies where the gangs get so out of control that they outnumber law enforcement, and that's what this movie plays with. What if all the gangs actually outnumber law enforcement, which is the driving force for this story?
Yes, that's exactly right, because our story starts and it bases itself around one of the numerous gangs, fictional gangs, of course, who occupy New York City in the United States. Now, now, obviously, as the title would give away, our gang that we focus on are called the Warriors, and they come from Coney Island in New York. Now, that's basically their territory, okay, that they run. Now, there is the biggest gang in New York City is led by a man called Cyrus. Now, what's his gang called again? Is it It's
oh shoot! I'll get it. Keep going. I'll get it. I remembered, but I forgot. It just fell out of my head.
But anyway, he runs the biggest gang. You know, they are the biggest gang, okay, in New York City. And he calls for a truce between all the gangs one night for them all to send representatives. I think it's meant to be eight people, I think they're meant to send, to come together in central New York, where there's going to be a great meeting and a huge announcement made.
Gramercy Riffs. Cyrus is the leader of the Gramercy Riffs. There we go. Sorry about that.
And so the Warriors, along with all sorts of other gangs, and we'll get into the way they're all dressed, because I think this is quite interesting. Okay, in regards to obviously what gangs refer to as their colours. So this is very interesting in this movie, right? This is where it's almost becomes a bit Walt Disney rather than being serious, I would argue. But anyway, so they all come together. Now, Cyrus comes up with a plan where basically he says that collectively, if all the gangs join together, they outnumber the police 3-1 in New York, which means that they can rule the city. They can stand over all businesses. They can run the city, basically, and the city will be theirs. I think they've kind of forgotten that the Americans also have a thing called an army as well. But anyway, we won't go down that path.
Yeah, they don't mention that in the movie. So
no.
Who knows what's going on with that?
Yes, so, they sort of just forget about that. But anyway, so they all come together. Now, during what Cyrus's great speech, where they're all getting very excited about doing this, Cyrus is murdered. He's shot. And he's shot by a gang member. Now, the gang that actually carry out the murder blame the warriors for doing it because they need a scapegoat. So now, as the meeting is all broken up and all hell breaks loose, the warriors have a problem. They're in central New York, and it's in the middle of the night, and the 8 of them have got to somehow get back to their own turf. Oh, you like that gang phrase there? Their own turf.
Turf. Look
And
at that.
yes, I know. Yeah. Anyway, and so they've got to get back to Coney Island. While they're being chased by every gang that there is in New York who's trying to kill them because they think that obviously they killed Cyrus. They're also trying to be chased down by the gang that really did the killing because they need to silence the warriors so the truth can't come out. And they're also being chased by the police. So basically everybody is after them. And our film follows their journey, their attempted escape through New York to get back to Coney Island, where they will, as we're giving this away, spoilers, eventually, most of them, not all of them, will get back to, because they will lose some on the way, will get back to Coney Island, where they will be met by the combined gangs. Who will actually be there. It's a bit like, well, actually, we don't have to chase you down. We just go to Coney Island and meet you when you get there.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Seriously.
So anyway, they do, but the truth comes out about what really happened, that the warriors are innocent. They didn't commit the murder. And the warriors are given a special prize, which is basically that there will be a new unified gang that will run all of New York except Coney Island. And the warriors will be allowed to run their own little area, and they will be the only separate gang in New York. And it's kind of their reward for what they went through. Crazy. There you go. So that's our movie. Now, of course, so much stuff will happen on the way, and most of this movie is about their attempted escape coming back through New York. So I will take a quick breath, and I suppose we could start analysing the various different scenes as they try to come back through New York, because that is what this film is about.
Definitely. I love the way this movie begins, because it's really fast paced. They tell you right from the beginning, there's a lot of different gangs. They're all going to converge in this one place to have this meeting. They're talking about some guy called Cyrus. And we find out, as we mentioned before, Cyrus is the leader of a humongous gang in New York called the Gramercy Riffs. And they've all got an agreement, temporary, parlay for all the gangs. Every single gang can venture out of their territory to this one meeting place because Cyrus wants to propose an idea. What if all of us gangs unite? All of us gangs become one super gang, and we can run the city because we outnumber law enforcement. They will not be able to handle us. So, okay, this is fucked up. But you're like getting into it. You're feeling it. You're like, look at the camaraderie. Yeah, let's all band together to do this shit. And then all of a sudden, somebody pulls out a gun and shoots Cyrus. Wait, What do you mean one person pulled out a gun? Remember, this was supposed to be a temporary truce, so nobody is bringing any kind of weapons. There's supposed to be no weapons. Truce, we're all coming in just to talk. So one person comes in, brings a weapon, and shoots Cyrus. And that's when the movie really takes off. But let's backpedal a bit, because you mentioned it already, the gangs. This is one of the things that's so fun about this movie, because some of it is super cool and some of it is super ridiculous. The way that you can tell everybody's in a different gang is all about their colors. It's very iconic for this movie, because it really is just like, everybody, if you're in my gang, you have to look this way, you have to dress that way. So the Warriors, for example, it's jeans and a red leather vest, and it says Warriors on the back. But then we have people like the Turnball ACs, and that one makes me laugh because we mentioned the Turnball ACs is basically a group of ethnically diverse skinheads.
How do you have ethnically diverse skinheads? That blows my mind, that does. That really does.
So funny, because they look like neo-Nazis, but you're wait, that guy is not white. Neither is that one. Wait, they're all different races. So I guess they all hate, but they've all combined their hate towards one certain hate. That's anybody who's not part of their territory. So
yes.
And they got like the slowest bus on the planet. They have this bus that goes like 5 miles an hour, and they're like chasing after the Warriors. And you're just like, okay, the Warriors can totally outrrun this bus.
They're like something out of Wacky Races. You expect Muttley to come up and sort of go, you know. I mean, I know. Some of the cars, I swear, were based on Wacky Races. But anyway.
But yeah, right from the beginning in the movie, you show all these different gangs going to this meeting, and they really set it up. Like you see, my God, what are some of the ones we see? I'm trying to think of the ones we just see walking. I think this was your favorite one. The one that we called the Mimes.
Oh, yes.
That was the best one. They actually have a name. They are called hi-hats. So they look like French mimes, and they're all wearing top hats. And yes, they are wearing white face paint with the black, eyeliner. And You're just like, I would love to know if that gang speaks or if they pantomime when they're committing their crimes.
You imagine them doing standover over a shopkeeper via mime. I mean, I wish I'd have put that in. That would have been great to see. That would have been hilarious,
But it's just every single gang dresses the same. My two favorites, I think they're everybody's two favorites, are probably the punks, which is funny because, punk has kind of a different connotation now, although we still use it. So we're not talking about punk rockers. We're talking about, just kind of like little snooze, bratty, trouble-causing kids. Their leader rides around on roller skates, and he just looks like he's bored and pissed off at the world. But somehow it works. It looks scary when he just rolls up on you in his roller skates, and he's going to kick your ass or he's going to rob you or beat you. I mean, just very cool. My other favorite gang, of course, would have to be the Baseball Furies. They look so scary. Guys dressed up as baseball players with ridiculous face war paint, and they run after your ass with a baseball bat, and you do not want to get hit by a baseball bat because it will probably kill you or give you brain damage.
Yes.
But there are, I don't even know how many gangs there are. There's actually great fan sites online that have all the gangs listed. I would say that there is most likely over 100 gangs in the actual movie that you will see. Like, I'll just name off a couple that if you really analyze it frame by frame and look at the huge gathering of people, there are so many people in costume, and some of them are actually in gangs. Like, they actually had to pay gang members protection money while they were shooting this film because they were actually shooting in gang territory. So you'll see people wearing vests that have their gang's, logo on it, basically. Like, there's one called the Alley Cats, the Fastballs. Oh, my goodness. There's the Moon Runners, the Queen's Bridge Mutilators.
Good God, yeah.
There's some crazy Young Bloods, the Zulus, Terriers, the Saratogas. I mean, there was a lot of crazy. I mean, it's just the trivia behind this movie is fantastic. But now I will take a breath and let you take over for a moment.
Well, just to finish off on the gangs themselves before we then sort of move on, is the thing I did like about the Warriors gang themselves, okay, is that they decided to make the gang non-racial. In other words, they were a racial mix. Black people, white people, Hispanic people, right?
Yes.
Which I thought was really good because they could have gone down the path of not doing that. And I thought that was just, I just liked that, you know.
Yes.
Now, even in saying that, these are still absolute bastards. They're assholes. They're criminals. They're gang members, right? But, you know, they commit horrible crimes, you know, I mean, but in saying that, as far as the movie is concerned, I really liked the way it was multiracial. I thought that was very well done. I thought that was very well done. And I also
think that makes it more realistic because, you know, sometimes gangs are racially divided, but I love in this movie, it's not the case. Like I said, we got multi-racial skinheads.
Yes.
So, I mean, every gang has ethnic diversity, which is really cool. Or I shouldn't say every gang does, but a lot of the gangs. The main gangs, most of them have ethnic diversity. I've always liked that, too. The acting in this movie always makes me chuckle because it is a little over the top or it's completely underplayed. There's like no happy medium. People are either like totally crazy, psychotic, over the top, or it's always, I never smile. I have very little affect to my voice. Everything's just deadpan underplayed.
Yes.
So I love that. I don't know. I wouldn't say there's any good acting in this movie, but it's not bad. It's just such a weird mix.
I'd say it's average. Yeah. It's average. Yeah.
Definitely.
It's average. The some other points I suppose to bring up is that one thing I love about this movie is actually the backing sound. I'm not talking about the music, but obviously was it set in the very early hours of the morning, you know, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., this sort of thing. Now, anyone who has memories or still does, who is ever out on the streets at those times in a city, knows just how the city it's asleep. It's so quiet. You know, everyone hasn't either got up yet or everyone's just gone to bed. You know what I mean? You've got that real quietness of it. And so there's this amazing atmosphere of this total deadpan, like there's no background noise, you know, apart from the odd subway train that moves. And to me, that just brought back so many memories of my teenage years, you know, being out too late on the street. But the other thing, too, about the actual sounds themselves is that I may have mentioned this in the last, the original time we did it, and that's the sound their shoes make when they walk and run. And it almost sounds like they're wearing tap shoes. It sounds really, there's a real, you know, click-clack of their shoes when they walk. And to me, it almost gave it a musical feel while they were walking. You know, they were almost creating their own soundtrack while they walk. I'm sure it was done intentionally. I cannot believe it was accidental.
Right.
And to me, it's really quite hypnotic when you hear them running and walking through the streets of New York, like at 2 a.m., to dead silence, and you just hear this clickety-clack of their shoes. It's really, really well done. Really, really well done. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to expound on that, to add to that detail, what I also love is that whereas you love the sound, I love the look, because the director just had this genius idea that, you know, they're filming this movie at night every night, that right before they would film the scene, they would always water down the street, like take a water hose, make the street wet. So it has that glossy, reflective look as they're running down the street. And it just adds to it instead of just being this, you know, dry cement, dry pavement. It just has this great reflective look to it that just adds to, for some reason, you think that's what the city would look like at night. And it's just very cool effect. They complement each other very well.
Oh, they really do. One thing I was going to ask you about is, obviously in this movie, they make sure they take enough spray cans so they can, you know, what do they call it? Tagging.
Tagging. Yes, they want to tag.
So they tag everything supposedly while they're moving through to show that the warriors were here.
Right.
The thing is, they only tagged one thing once. That's it. Like, they never seem to do it again. And I sort of thought, have they just forgotten that? Or is it actually just that they've kind of got more important things on their mind now, like trying to stay alive?
Exactly. I have to agree with you on that because, if they were out there, okay, I know you want to kick my ass. Can you let me finish this W? Like,
yeah.
I don't think they had time to tag. But that was they definitely wanted to make their mark in the city, but they also need to do what they need to do to survive. It's a very simple premise, but it keeps you engaged the whole time. There's lots of fights because they're just trying to get home. And this is not like it is today. You know, you couldn't call an Uber or a Lyft. And these guys came from Coney Island, so they were relying on public transportation, which is pretty typical for a New York setting. A lot of people in New York, even to this day, don't own a car. They walk everywhere or take public transportation or take a taxi just because, you drove there. Now where are you going to park the car? So that's always been a highly populated area. So it's interesting how this film deals with this gang trying to get home. They have to... at first they're just like, okay, if we can just make it to the fucking train station, we're home free. But it gets sabotaged and the train station actually gets, corrupted. It gets burnt. They can't ride it. It's shut down. So now they have to high foot it as much as they can. So they've got a long journey. And in order for them to walk, and run home, they have to run through all these other territories. Every single territory has a gang attached to it. And if they're running through with their colors on, with their warrior shit in, that's taken as an insult and a direct attack. So no matter what they do, everybody's trying to kick their ass. And now everybody thinks that they killed this leader from another gang. And that's an instant war cry. And it's, so they're like in a really bad situation.
Yes. Yes, most definitely, and of course, they're very proud, obviously, of their gang. They are asked at one time. They're told that you can pass through our territory if you take your jackets off. So we will let you pass if you take the jackets off, and then you can put them back on when you're past the territory. They refuse to, and then so of course a fight will start because of that. So they are very proud. They are very loyal to each other, mostly. Not one of them is maybe not so 100% loyal. I don't know. It tends to be a little bit more of an individual, you might say, but it catches up with him in the end. The other thing too that's really interesting about this movie is that we are obviously drawn into them. We side with them. We want them to get away. We want them to survive. They become our gang, if you like. We become, the warriors while we're watching. We become part of the gang. But at the same time, they're still saying horrible things, when they're moving.
People.
Every time they meet a woman, they threaten to gang rape her. That it's they're not nice people, and it is that interesting thing, isn't it? The anti-hero, it's like where we side with the with the bad person. But in this movie, even for all their hideous talk, that they have, and their obsession with homosexuals, I really was fucking blown away by that. Everybody they meet, they refer to as a homosexual for some reason.
Right.
Look, I know why they're doing it. It's 1979.
Right.
And in 1979, the idea was that being gay was viewed as being effeminate, which meant that you weren't a man, from a male perspective. So it was meant to be an insult.
Right.
But so you have to take it, I suppose, in the terms of 1979.
Yes.
But when you watch it now in 2018, you just go, why are they so obsessed with gays?
Which makes it kind of funny, it's like, they really think that's like the worst thing you could be. They're fucking murderers and rapists, but that's better than being gay. You know, I mean, it's really kind of funny. And that's, I don't want to say it makes this movie charming, but that's one of those things that's the kind of movie you could make back then. And that was considered normal. And now it's funny to watch these movies and we're like, God, they're saying this awful shit. But, Yeah, there's a lot of lot of anti-homosexual rhetoric in this film, but the way it's done is, yeah, it's not nice, but it always makes me laugh because it's just, you just don't expect that now, because in a lot of movies they avoid that kind of stuff, and only the most heinous, horrible characters in movies now talk that way. Whereas in this movie, these are our heroes. These are our protagonists. And they're acting that way and talking that way. And these are the beliefs they hold. But yet we find ourselves rooting for them. So, yeah, perfect anti-heroes, really. The other thing that always makes me laugh is, well, excuse me, I take that back. I was going down a different way, but now I'm going this way. So let me take that comment back. Okay. Let me say this. This I find interesting. This does not make me laugh. That this whole movie is almost a sausage party. Like, it is just man, 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 men, men, man, man, man. I mean, there are no women. And then finally one woman pops up and she is tough. Yes. This is a tough chick. And we find out slowly that she's more or less a streetwalker. She's a prostitute, and she takes no shit, gives no shit. And she ends up being, you know, a real asset to the gang. And she's a tough lady. And then there's only two other women that we see in the movie, and they are the stereotypical kind of clueless. They're not involved in the gang life. They live that mainstream, non-criminal lifestyle. And they just happen to run into, you know, the warriors on public transit, and they're like, okay, we need to get off at the next stop because these are not people we need to be associating with. Like, we do not belong in that life. They do not belong in ours. Let's keep it that way. So it's interesting that the one female character that is actually integral to the story is they focus on the criminal. And I'm sorry, I said there's no other women. There are the Lizzies. Excuse me, what was I thinking?
The female gang.
There is a female gang. Excuse me. So it's interesting how women are portrayed in this movie because they're shown as doing what they got to do to survive. Whereas with the Lizzies, as well as Mercy, our prostitute, I need to come up with a better description for her. They use their feminine wiles to draw men in and to get what they need and or want. So, interesting portrayal of women in this movie. Being kind of ruthless, being tough. Yeah.
It's also, we brought this up in the first time we looked at this movie, and that is that when they meet the people on the train who are out for the night, and the looks that are between one of the women and between and Mercy, our gang woman, is really interesting. And I still don't really understand what they were trying to portray by that. It was a little bit like, was Mercy almost sort of saying, I want that life or I don't want that life? It's still something that I'm a bit confused about.
I think she was definitely showing a little bit of shame for the fact that she was trying to fix her hair. And that's when, like, Swan, our leader of the warriors, Swan, you know, takes her hand and keeps her from fixing her hair. And he's basically saying, you are who you are, don't be ashamed. But there's a lot of great interpretations for that scene. No dialogue, but definitely you see there is that rift between social classes. You have these people that the only way they can survive is by being criminals. And then you have this other class that they don't have a care in the world. It looks like they're actually coming from a dance or even possibly like a high school prom, as we would call it, which is, you know, a huge like rite of passage for teenagers. And you can tell Swan and Mercy, our tough lady and our gang leader, they never had those privileges. They've never had this carefree lifestyle. They probably never had a normal childhood, or else they wouldn't be in gangs or living the lifestyles that they're leading, which is interesting. And it was also interesting how Swan, I mean, he's a fucking criminal. He's like, kind of the mouthpiece for his gang while they're on this little excursion to the city. And he is passing judgment on Mercy for doing what she has to do to survive, which, she is a lady of the night. And it's interesting how, like, even among criminals, there's like, well, at least I'm not a drug dealer. Oh, at least I'm not a murderer. Oh, at least I'm not a prostitute. Like, he's passing judgment on her. I don't like the way you live your life.
Yes.
And she's like, and she even says to him, you think you're better than me?
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're a fucking criminal too, dude. So there's a lot about social class and prejudice, and people just thinking that, well, I'm a criminal, but I'm not that kind of criminal, so I'm not as bad as that criminal. And it's like, nah, I don't know. Maybe there's layers. Maybe there's lines to draw. I don't know.
Well, the other thing, too, about this is that we never really learn what the warriors do. Like, in other words, how do they survive? Now, they're a gang, obviously. They run the territory of Coney Island, but for instance, are they just a standover gang? Do they murder people? Do they kidnap people? It's like we never, do they sell drugs? We don't really ever get to learn what their crime references are, other than just knowing that they're a gang sort of thing.
Right.
Which I think in some ways is good, because if we really knew what they were about, it'd be much, much harder for us to sympathize with them.
Yeah. Rockstar Games, when they made a video game of the Warriors, they did do certain scenes that are from the movie, but they invented a lot of stuff. And it was interesting because I watched a playthrough of the game where you got to see all the cut scenes, and they expounded on that whole mythology of the Warriors. And you see them doing drug deals and robbing people and stealing shit, all the horrible criminal shit you can think of, they're doing it in that game. And it was interesting to be like, I guess they would be doing this kind of stuff if they're a legitimate crime gang. And it's it's really weird, because even though they're in a gang, to actually see them as part of the game committing these crimes. And I mean, there's even a scene where Ajax, played by James Remar, is, in the movie, you get the sense that he's pretty rough with women, that he's probably a rapist. There's a scene in the game where for half a second he's pretty much getting ready to rape a girl, and he gets interrupted, and you're like, God damn, he really is a rapist, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, probably the most likable rapist you'll ever see in a movie, because he's such a piece of shit, but he has all the best lines in the movie. He's always saying all the anti-homosexual stuff, and but he makes you laugh. And you're just like, oh, man, this dude, what's he going to say next? What's he going to do next? He's always ready for a fight, which is honestly one of the things that makes him a fun character, because he's always ready to beat somebody's ass and get in a fight. But he's a horrible person.
Yes, he is. I mean, it's like when the decision's made, we've got to keep moving. But he just wants to stand and fight all the time. And of course, if they followed his logic, they'd never get home. No. So yes, that's very, 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 very interesting. He will, of course, get his upcomers. Is that a right word? He will get caught by comeuppance is what I meant. Sorry, upcomers. Sorry,
I said the other way too.
And he will get caught by the police because he falls for a honey trap.
My goodness. Yes.
And I suppose, from what you've just described about his character, if the police are going to get him, that's a pretty easy way for the police to get him, to honey trap him. And that's exactly what they do. So, so that's interesting. The other thing too, one of the scenes, my favorite scene, in this movie, I think is when the Warriors are being chased by, now I've forgotten their name, you'll have to remind me again, Velvet, the baseball gang.
The Baseball Furies.
The Baseball Furies. When they're being chased through the park, the cinematography of the running chase is really, really good. It's not shot the way you would normally shoot a chase, where you've got a group of people chasing after another one. This is almost filmed like it's a running race. It's really, really, really weird. But when you watch it, it's very, very interesting to watch, because it's not like any other chase scene you've ever seen before. It's very long. It goes on for it's almost like Tom Cruise, in his running scenes, he runs for 5 minutes straight. It's like, you just got to run, Tom, run. We've got a kilometre. Just keep running,
Oh my goodness.
But it's a great scene. I love
laugh because when they first start walking up, the Baseball Furies start walking up, and you're like, wait, is that a baseball game?
Yeah.
You're like, wait, are they on their way to a game? Am I in trouble? Am I in danger? But then you start seeing that they're wearing all this like crazy face paint. I mean, like face to neck face paint. And then, I think even one of the warriors goes, what the hell is that? And then the fucking gang starts running towards them. And that's when they realize, oh shit, we got to run too, because they're swinging baseball bats. And I love that scene. It's just so
It is
freaky.
great. I know.
When you first see it, you're like, oh my God, that is so freaky. They're fucking crazy. One of the great things about the story of the movie is that, so the entire time, the warriors are just trying to get home, try to avoid all these gangs, that are trying to beat them up or kill them, and I think they think it's just because they're crossing through territory. The movie itself is only an hour and a half, but for the first hour and 10 minutes, the warriors have no idea that they've even been accused of killing Cyrus, the leader of the Gramercy Rips. So they have no idea that every gang out there is after them. They have no clue.
And and this brings up another interesting point, and that is the soundtrack, which is run by a radio DJ. Really interesting way to, I suppose, bring the little segments together. It's like so we just see the mouth speaking into a microphone of a radio DJ who plays the soundtrack to the movie. So she actually plays the soundtrack. Very, very interesting way to do the music. Rather than just having music, it's continual songs which are played by the DJ. And the DJ also gives us up-to-date information about where they are, where they're going, what gang's coming after them, a next sort of thing. It's a very, very interesting, it's almost a piece of narration that goes over the top. Wasn't necessary, but actually I think it makes it work better. It works really well.
Well, also, that is what I like about this movie, is that this is pre-cell phones, pre-internet, so the DJ, the radio, is the communication for all the gangs. They have, I think every gang has a radio, and they listen to the DJ, and she's the one giving everybody a heads up. Everybody get the warriors. Everybody, this is the territory the warriors were last seen in. And then finally, when they get this whole thing cleared up, that's when she's like, whoops, sorry about that, warriors. All we can do is play you a song.
Yeah, I know.
So, but really cool. Yeah.
But in saying that, as we said at the start, they do get given the only turf outside the newly formed mega gang. So they do actually come out of this doing pretty well. I mean, yeah, they lost a couple of their members, but, from the gang's perspective, they actually come out of this as winners. Yes, they do. My God. Yes, they do. And let's talk a little bit more about the Rogues. Yes, the Rogues, their leader is Luther. Yes.
And he is the one that right at the beginning of the movie, you see him kill Cyrus. He shoots him from the crowd. Nobody can tell. And the only person to witness it is actually one of the members of the Warriors. So that's when Luther's like, he did it. It was the Warriors. Get him. And so everybody thinks that the Warriors killed Cyrus. So, of course, that one dude knew that they'd been accused, but they all get separated. The rest of the warriors have no idea what's going on. They keep getting separated. They have their meeting points where they try to meet up, try to get home together. But Luther, this dude, is so fucking crazy. And I remember for the longest time when I was younger and I saw this movie, Luther is played by David Patrick Kelly, but I was a kid, and for the longest fucking time, I thought Luther was played by Sean Penn.
Oh, really?
I was like, oh, I love Sean Penn in The Warriors. And finally, eventually, one day, I was like, oh, that is not Sean Penn. That is David Patrick Kelly, which he's still acting to this day. You've seen him in a lot of other movies. but he was not in... But yeah, Sean Penn was not in The Warriors. Okay, so...
Damn it, no Sean Penn.
No, but lot of overacting by David Patrick Kelly to play this character of Luther, which is fitting for this movie because everybody either overacts or they underplay it. And the character he plays is just psychotic because they ask him, they're like, why did you shoot Cyrus? And he's like, no reason. I just like doing things like that. Like, Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
What a fucking asshole. What a dickhead.
Because there was no plan. It wasn't like they were going to try to take over the gang or, or anything like that. He just kills him because, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Just because I could. Yeah, just because I could.
But I suppose that makes him, I don't know. See, would he have been, I suppose that makes him more of a psycho if he'd actually done it because he was trying to take over the gangs, almost like he was trying to replace Cyrus.
Right.
Then maybe we would feel more sympathy for him because he's got a plan. But because he doesn't have a plan, he's just a psycho. We hate him. We don't like him.
Psycho. He's just a psycho. Well, look at the way he acts. So he and his gang, the Rogues, meet the Warriors on their turf in Coney Island, and they roll up in this old fucking car, and he's got 3 glass bottles on his fingertips, and he's clanging them together, and he keeps going, "Warriors, come out to play!"
Yeah.
And he keeps saying it over and over and over. It gets creepier and creepier and creepier. You know, this dude's just fucking unhinged, and he thinks he's going to kill the Warriors and be the fucking hero of the day. But you can tell he doesn't care about the glory. He just wants to clear. He just wants to make sure nobody can talk so that he doesn't get accused of the murder he actually committed. But we're getting to the end of this movie. A lot of people think the ending of this movie is very anticlimactic. It is a little bit, but I like it because it's a simple movie with a simple premise. It's really fun visually, and the ending, I like it. What do you think of the ending of this movie, Warren?
Yeah, I don't think you could have made it an ending too complicated because the movie itself is very simple.
Right.
If you had to try to get into the politics of the gangs and who was going to do what and take control of what, it's like, well, hang on, we haven't seen any of that in the movie before. Why would we conceivably see it now,
Right.
So I like the ending, just the idea of them just walking down the beach. That's it.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
We survived and we won. It's over. I think it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, we got spoiler review going on here. So if you haven't watched the movie or you haven't heard the other review and you don't want to be spoiled, you might want to fast forward about 10, maybe 20 minutes, knowing us, to go to the next movie. But I want to talk about the actual stand down. So if this was your spoiler warning, don't say I didn't warn you. And here we go. So, again, good old Luther from the Rogues. He's got his trusty gun that he's already used to murder Cyrus, and now he plans on killing all the Warriors, and he's got his gang surrounding him. And so right as he pulls out the gun and he's getting ready to shoot Swan, the leader of the Warriors, what does he do? He throws a knife. The knife lands in Luther's hand, and he's all, ah! And then all of a sudden, the Gramercy Riffs show up, and they're like, he's the one that killed Cyrus. Here's his gun. And the Gramercy Riffs, the ones that have lost their leader, Cyrus, they crowd around the entire group of the Rogues with hockey sticks, and you hear them just screaming, no! So,
I thought it was good. I thought it was good.
I love that ending.
Yeah. It's almost it's like the lone animal surrounded by the pack of wolves just coming in.
Good one.
It's very. I think it's very well done. It's like I said before. It's simple, but it needs to be simple. It can't be overthought because the rest of the movie is not overthought. So I think it ends, it's, very, very well. We even, to a degree, have, true love is found, at the end.
Which is unexpected. I'm always wondering if she's going to give up her life of walking the streets to be, Swan's girl in the Warriors now, because I don't think he's going to let her do that shit if they're going to be together, right? He's don't worry, anything you need, I'll steal for you. Anybody bothers you, I'll kill them. Don't worry about it.
You were trying to hope so, but they're a gang. Who bloody knows, I mean, he might end up just becoming a pimp, You know,
Oh my God, yeah, that is so possible.
I mean, yeah,
oh my God,
you know, I mean, that's the thing. We look at it with such rose-colored filters. You know, it's like because we've it's spelled an hour and a half of our emotion into these guys. We bond with them, we feel for them. And by the end of the movie, we've forgotten that these are thugs, murderers, rapists, drug dealers. I mean, you know, we totally forget that. We totally forget that.
It is so crazy.
You know,
this always makes me laugh once I realize this. So Michael Beck, the actor that plays Swan in The Warriors, I mean, the entire movie, never smiling, flat affect, just a tough-ass dude. But then a year after this movie was made, we get to see his range as an actor, smiling and skating around. His name is Sonny Malone in that movie. And what am I talking about? He's in Xanadu.
Dude, I know. You talk about a difference, don't you? Xanadu.
Which I guess we'll have to review someday.
We have to do Xanadu someday.
We have to do Xanadu someday. I mean, I'd love to see a range in an actor like that, going from this awful character to this happy-go-lucky guy skating around.
Xanadu. Oh, my God.
Fantastic.
Oh, my God. Great. Xanadu, great premise, great idea, just didn't kind of work. It's something you can't take a 1950s musical and just plot it in the 1980s to disco music and think it's going to work. It's just, yeah, real shame. But anyway, we're not talking about Xanadu.
Not yet. But we will eventually.
Not yet. Now, I wanted to just quickly bring up a couple of kind of like didn't get about it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Number one, why don't they just steal a couple of cars? Why do they have to try to walk 50 kilometres back to Coney Island? Why don't they steal a couple of cars? Now, you know.
That is a great question. And I have to admit, there was like no cars in this movie. I mean, there were a couple. And they were always like, you know, be like like 50 people in one car, like a fucking clown car. So, I mean, like, I don't know. This movie's from 1979, but there were definitely cars. I can understand them not taking a car to get there. But yeah, like you said, why didn't they just steal a car?
Cars? I mean, it's 1979 American cars. Not very hard to break into and hotwire, right? You know?
I don't know if it's just it would have just been too easy to link them to the crime. It would be too easy for the car to get found, and then we made it back to Coney Island, but now the cops are on our ass about this stolen car. I'm really not sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that was number one. Although I suppose the main reason is that we wouldn't get to see them run through New York if they were in a car. The movie would only last 20 minutes rather than an hour and a half. Maybe that's the reason why.
Right.
The next question is that, okay, guns are not exactly hard to get hold of in the United States. That's for ordinary people, let alone gang members. We know the Warriors are not carrying guns because they're meant to have gone to this meeting unarmed. However, why do none of the other gangs have guns?
Actually, in 1979, it was different from what I've been hearing, because I've asked this question to other people, too. They're like, the stereotype that we get from movies is that everybody that's in a gang is walking around with a gun, and that was really not the case, especially not in the 70s. Like, it's a huge stereotype. Okay. So I think now, maybe, yeah, definitely. But back then, like, it actually wasn't uncommon for, like, a gang to be like maybe they had one gun that was like the communal gun for the whole gang.
Right, okay.
Else, yeah, so I was surprised to hear that too. And they're like, nah, it was a huge stereotype. It's a huge stereotype. So it actually makes sense for this movie that, no, the gangs were not heavily artilleried like they are now. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I was like, okay.
Very, very interesting. Also, the other thing too is that, and this is not a problem, but it's to go back to just how successful this movie was when we spoke about it. Now, $4 million to make, returned at the box office $22.5 million. So it was very, very successful. Definitely a movie of its time, I think. But I don't think it's actually dated that badly. Even though we talk about the language is a bit, oh God, and stuff like that. But
and also the slang is not, people don't say, I'm going to lay down some wool. I mean, nobody says that about, I'm going to have sex with women. I'm like, wait, what did he say?
Yes, it's
what that means?
It's almost like, one of them would walk up to a woman and sort of say, let's pitch some woo, It's like, sort of thing. But it's but I think it's still it's dated pretty well, to a degree. It's I think one of the reasons is that not so much because of the acting, but to going back to what you originally were talking about, Velvet, and that is the cinematography. It's actually shot really well.
Yes.
It is actually shot really well. And I think it does hold up, especially if you watch it, as in a good print, not some, lousy, bloody, ripped off, thing. If you watch a good print of this, it's actually, it holds itself up, I think, still, even today. Almost 40 years later. So
definitely. And this movie is like, it's beloved. It's a cult favorite. It's been restored very nicely. There's different versions of it now. As we've seen, there's the one without the comic book tiles, and then there's the director's cut with the comic book tiles. There's deleted scenes that have been put in. This is a loved movie. It's been very nicely restored, and they're really maintaining it for future generations. But I agree with you. Although you can obviously tell it's not current times, it's not so dated that it's ridiculous. But although a lot of people, as newer generations come along that are going to discover this film, they're not going to be able to understand, okay, why don't the gangs have guns? Why can't they get guns? Why are they running everywhere? Who runs everywhere? Why can't they just take a taxi or take a car?
Yeah.
It's like a lot of stuff like that. It is becoming dated. A lot of people too now, I think, and I'm talking about the younger generation, they see movies like this and they're just like, no cell phone, no internet. Like, how did people live?
Yes, I know. No Instagram selfies while you're on the run,
Right, seriously. They couldn't track them with GPS, all this great technology that we have now in just recent decades that have become mainstream technology. But I love that about this movie is that there was that time that things were not so easy or accessible.
No, that's it. That is exactly right. Now, one thing too, because this movie is 19 years old. No, 19 years old. No, 16 years. No, 26 years old. Sorry.
There you go.
Oh no. No, 29. No, 20. No, 29 years old, isn't it? 29 years old.
Damn.
So no. So hang on. My math today. What
I
am
I grabbing a calculator?
1979 to 2018. Right. Warren, do your maths.
39.
It's 39 years old.
Wow.
Oh my God.
I had to get a calculator. This movie is almost as old as I am.
But
I love it. I love it. It's only 2 years older than me. No, it's 1 year older than me. Wow, amazing.
Wow, there you go.
This movie's 1 year older than me. Look how much I love it.
But because of its age, Velvet, are you surprised we haven't seen a remake of this?
It's in remake hell. It's in production hell. They were trying to come out with a remake. They wanted it to be in Los Angeles instead of California. And I believe they wanted it to be all black gangs. And I believe they also most likely want to implement a lot of weapons like you see now in gang movies. So it keeps it's 50-50. Some people are like, oh yeah, that sounds cool, but I'm a purist on this one. I'm like, wow, no, if you remake this, it's got to stay in New York. I don't know. Just
yeah, I would hate to see that. One thing, as we said originally, we love the idea that it's multiracial. Taking that away from it, I don't know. I hate to use the word, they know what they're doing, but I often think they don't,
Right.
You know, I think the thing about, you know, this movie is that it doesn't matter what race, color, whatever you are in this movie, you know, for this movie.
Right.
There's something in it for everyone. Everyone can identify you know, if you tried to make it, you know, just around about one culture or something, I think it would spoil it.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, no, I think that's also realistic to a lot of gangs nowadays, is that there usually is, sorry, I'm just like reading some of the trivia that I'll have to bring up in a moment. Most gangs are multiracial nowadays. They're usually not strictly, oh, this is the Chinese gang, this is the black gang. I mean, there's usually a lot of ethnic diversity. It's just they all have a common belief, whatever that is, that makes that gang. And I'm just looking at some of the great trivia that they have on this movie. There's so much stuff in this. Okay, Swan. Originally, there was a script. It obviously got written out. Originally, he was supposed to be abducted by a homosexual and sadomasochistic gang who had a Doberman pinscher.
Why? Okay. Wow.
That would have been a whole different movie.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness. I would have loved to have seen what the gang looked like. They probably would have all looked like the fucking Gimp from Pulp Fiction.
Oh, I know. Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, that's wow. Sorry.
Robert De Niro? Oh, no, it's okay. I got a couple trivia for you.
Oh, yeah, no, go for it. Because I'm thinking we should probably wrap this one up. Otherwise, we'll run out of time for the other ones. But no, go for it. What was the trivia you've got, Velvet?
Okay, Robert De Niro was asked to be in the movie, and he passed on it. He was supposed to be the cowboy member of the Warriors. Okay, right. And he passed on it. All right, I'll stop there because, yeah, there's tons and tons and tons of trivia on the Warriors. I think we've gotten to say everything we wanted to say about this one this time around.
I think we covered it in a bit more depth, which is what we wanted to do. We wanted to re-look at it because we did it quite a long time ago. So,
definitely.
Okay. No, that was really good. And the other thing too, actually, let's rate it. Let's see, where do we go now? All
right. For me, the rating stays the same. This is, and I've said this in the last time we reviewed it, I'll say it again. This is, if I had to pick 10 movies, this movie would be on my top list of my favorite movies of all time. It just makes me so happy. I'm so entertained every time I watch it. I love it, love it, love it. It is not a perfect movie by any means. Some scenes are dated. There's offensive language. These are horrible people. They're total anti-heroes. But I love this movie. So out of a possible 5 Eric Roberts, I am giving it 5 Erics.
Excellent. And I don't know what I rated it last time. I can't remember, actually. So this is going to be interesting if anyone's listening back to the old podcast. But I'm going to give it 4.5.
I believe that's actually what you gave it last time. You
really?
Gave it 4 or 4.5.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. I will say this, though. Second time watching it, I enjoyed it more than the first time. I actually enjoyed it more. I think I got a bit more out of it. Yes. So I really, really highly recommend this one. If you haven't seen it, even though you know, and you know exactly what's just happened now. So, but I still don't think that would even spoil the movie, to be honest.
No, not at all. It is still so fun to watch. It's just such a crazy. You hope this kind of near future never happens where gangs outnumber law enforcement. And it's like, I mean, that's why, one of the things about this movie, you only see gangs out at night. There are no civilians out at night. Only that one group of teenagers coming home from a prom, but that was obviously supposed to be in a good area where they were most likely supposed to be safe. Or maybe they realized they've gotten on the wrong train and they are going to get right the fuck off at the next stop.
I know. Interesting.
Okay. If you guys want to hear more about the Warriors, we reviewed this originally on episode 29. So episode 29 is if you want to hear our other review of the Warriors.
Cool. All right. Well, we will take a quick musical break and then we will be back with our second re-review of the podcast.
Nice.
Time, take us back in time. Why can't we rewind and take it back to where we used to be? Time, take us back in time. Why can't we rewind and take it back to where we used to be? We shouldn't let this die. Then again, I often wonder why. Every day feels like there's nothing left to say. Is it time? Tell me there's another way. There's no reason left to stay. Is it time? Tell me there's another way. Time, take us back in time. Why can't we rewind and take it back to where we used to be? Time, take us back in time. Why can't we rewind and take it back to where we used to be?
Well, that was Milk Incorporated with Time. Hope you were jumping around as we were. Velvet was there dancing on the table.
As I do.
Yes, so I have to admit, I jumped up and had a bit of a dance as well. So, oh dear, no. Milk Incorporated from the Netherlands. Yes, and it is the Netherlands, not Holland. I always get caught up on this because I always call the Netherlands Holland, and as a couple of my friends,
a lot of us do it,
keep pointing out, Holland is part of the Netherlands. The country is called the Netherlands.
Right.
It was a little bit like calling the United States California. It's not actually right. It is the Netherlands. So anyway, now we are on to our second film, and I think anyone who has listened to this show for quite a while will know that this movie probably was going to be in the re-review episode. It was just probably going to happen. And what movie are we talking about? Well, it is, in my mind, the amazing cult classic from 1984, Sheena-Queen of the Jungle. And I'm so happy that we're actually sort of re-looking, at this film. Directed by John, Gilliman, from 1984. All shot on location in Kenya, in Africa. And look, for me, everybody knows my love affair with this comic book heroine. So there's no real need for me to sort of say how much I love it. We'll give a quick rundown of it again in a moment. But how did you sort of just generally feel before we get stuck into the guts of it, Velvet, by seeing it a second time?
Oh, I love this movie. I'm really impressed that they actually shot this on location in Kenya. And I just love the variety of animals, wild and Hollywood trained, that you see in it. I think it's just a massive undertaking, and it's amazing that it was made. It's highly underrated. Not enough people have seen this movie.
Yes, it's we'll give you a quick rundown of it, and then we'll very quickly. I'm not going to go into the huge backstory of the Sheena comic books and everything. We did that on the last, on the original podcast, so I won't do that. I think we'll just concentrate really more on the movie this time around, rather than the comic books themselves. So. Basically, our story is that a group of scientists, husband and wife, are in Africa, and they are trying to hunt down a tribe in Africa called the Zambulis. And the Zambulis, there is a sort of tale going around that there is some sort of magical power that either they have or that the area where they live has, where they can sort of rebirth people. They can bring the dead back to life. And they're kind of sort of researching this, and is it true? Isn't it true? And so forth. So anyway, they're also with their young daughter, who is only an infant at this stage. Now, they meet up with the Zambuli tribe, and they find they're accepted into the tribe so they can do their study. Now, while they're off one day exploring a cave by where the main town is, they accidentally set off a cave-in, and they are killed. They are, killed and buried in the cave. And, of course, our young child will then be adopted by the shaman of the tribe, who is just called Shaman, and she will raise this young child as Sheena, basically in light with the tribe's prophecy that a blonde-haired woman will come to sort of lead them out of disaster, to lead them forward in their greatest time of need. It's almost like a sort of biblical story, in a weird way. So anyway, we will see Sheena grow up into the very stunning young woman that she becomes, played by Tanya Roberts. And in the meantime, in this African nation, we have a king and a queen, and the queen is plotting with the prince, the king's brother, to overthrow him, to take over the country, and then to rob the Zambulis blind of all the mineral wealth which is buried under their land. And of course, a news reporter or sports reporter will be hired to go along to he will get conned into going there to witness this murder, which they will blame of the king, which they will blame on the Zambulis, and then that will be their excuse to take over over their land. What will then happen is that Sheena and our reporter will basically join together to try to stop them, to save the animals, to save the tribe, and of course, well, we all know they will, of course, save the tribe, save the animals, and of course, this new evil king and his queen and the mercenaries that they hire will, of course, get their upcomance. Upcomance? Have I just made up another word again? Comeuppance. It's the same word. It's the same word. It's the same word. Oh God.
That's your magic word.
Oh, that's the word. That's the word for this podcast, isn't it? So they will get it in the end anyway, and everyone will be happy. Although, love will triumph, but also we will see the pain, of separation as well, which we'll get to in a moment. That's a brief rundown. Oh, I will take a breath.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Now, first off, we just have to always say that if you've never seen this movie, do yourself a favor. Definitely check it out. Tanya Roberts is just so beautiful in it. And if you're an animal lover, you definitely want to see this movie, because there are several scenes in the movie where she is willing to give her life to protect animals. But I love the villainy in this film, because stereotypically you might think, oh, it's going to be white man coming to take over Africa, and it's actually their own people committing this great crime against them that Sheena gets involved with, that she thwarts. So I really love the story for this movie because it's really unsuspecting. It's just not at all what I expected when I watched this the first time I saw it. And gosh, I just don't know what else to say.
Well, it's I suppose we'll just, as I said, we're not going to go into the huge history, but we will just say a couple of things about how the movie is different to the original comic books. Although the current crop of comic books, Sheena was reinvented, so the whole story got reborn, okay, and totally changed. Even the continent, Sheena moved to South America, so it totally changed. But some differences between the original comic books, of which this was based on, the comic books that ran through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and to what this is based on. Now, a couple of things. Shaman, not a character in the comic books. That's was a new character. They also changed the name of Sheena's sort of assistant, love interest, whatever you want to call him. They made him a different person. Also, the way Sheena came to be in Africa was changed a little bit. She was originally it was meant to be that she was there with her father, and her father was accidentally poisoned. And then she would grow up sort of, in Africa, a bit more sort of Tarzan style, actually, more than sort of the way this movie portrays it. But so they did make some changes there to it. In many ways, I actually see this a little bit as a retelling, or almost because we'd had a TV series of Sheena in the 1950s. This was almost maybe a bit of a rebirth or a retelling, of it. Sort of trying to go back to the basics sort of it. And you could almost say that where this movie ends, the comic books start. Does that make sense? They tried to almost maybe make it a little bit more like that. And I think that's the reason why it's sort of a bit different to the comic books in many ways, although there's a lot of similarities. It's a little bit like, I think, when they did The Saint, with Val Kilmer. It wasn't the Saint that everybody was used to, because it told the story of how of Simon Templar became the Saint. Where I think in this movie, it sort of explains how Sheena became Sheena-Queen of the Jungle.
Ah, okay. Yeah,
so maybe that's a way to maybe look at it, along those lines. Yes, one thing I do love about, I suppose we have to address the elephant in the room. Notice how I did that?
Look what he did there.
And there are a lot of people today, okay, who do claim that Sheena is a racist story of old white imperialism.
Jeez.
Now, how do you feel about that, Velvet? Because I'd be interested to get your opinion.
Yeah, I definitely don't agree with that. I think sometimes people interpret way too much stuff. And I mean, especially with any comic book, sometimes there is that political edge to it, whereas Sheena is an eco-warrior, and that is really the heart of the story. I don't think it is about Caucasian imperialism, but so there's always going to be people that look for controversy where there really is none, or I would hope there is none. So I definitely don't agree with that sentiment at all. I don't get that impression at all. Yeah, of course, the whole story is absurd, but all comic book stories of heroes and heroines are absurd.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
Right. So, I mean, Sheena, her superpower is that she can communicate with animals. And I believe you said that actually goes away in some comics. And then in some comics, she actually is able to turn into animals. Yeah. So, I mean, she's a comic book superheroine. So, yeah, people should not take this stuff too seriously. But there's always that crowd that does. And they ruin all the fun. And they should go kick rocks instead of watching this movie and let the rest of us enjoy it.
That is exactly right. For me, I actually think on film, and I have to include television in this, okay? Because obviously we've had 2 television series of Sheena-Queen of the Jungle, and we had this movie. Now, obviously, this movie had the biggest budget, of all of them, and it was the only one actually shot in Africa. But I do believe that this is the best telling of Sheena on film. It may not be the closest to the comic book. The original 1950s TV show is actually probably the closest to, although it's a bit more family friendly, maybe, but it's probably the closest. But I think this interpretation is definitely the best interpretation that's been put onto cinema. I mean, I love Gina Lee Nolan. Do not get me wrong. I think she's fantastic, but I don't really think she was the best person to cast as Sheena. For me, one of the reasons is that you'll notice in this that, Tanya Roberts speaks with broken English, right? She actually speaks with broken English. Whereas the problem that Gina Lee Nolan had playing the role was that she sounded like she'd just come out of a California university. And it just didn't really, although the intention, though, of the latter TV series was sort of went down the track more of the modern comic books, and that is that Sheena has lived outside of the jungle, right? She's actually experienced the world, right? She knows all about, everything. Whereas with this movie, the original comic books and the original TV series, it's still based on the fact that she's never really left her place of birth, or her where she lives, right? So it's different.
Right.
So I thought that Tanya Roberts was kind of quite good, with the way that she spoke, with her dialogue. I would say that she overacts it a bit. I mean, I will say that, but she was a pretty young actress at the time when she was doing this.
Definitely. Yes.
And the other thing too, originally they were going to cast Raquel Welch as Sheena.
Yeah,
Now,
they also were looking at Bo Derek as well as Jodie Foster. So,
wow.
I mean, there were quite a few options that would have been interesting. I think Tanya Roberts was the way to go.
Oh, absolutely. I think she nailed it. I think she just absolutely nailed it. And I'm not just talking because she's so drop-dead gorgeous, but she just seemed to... She did seem to embrace the character, I thought, You really do believe, even though she does ham it a bit and overacts it a bit, but you really do believe that she really does love the animals, and she really is a true eco-warrior, she... Yeah.
And one of my criticisms about the film, and I'm lax on this criticism now because you explained this in an interesting way the first time we reviewed it, is that she does not have an African accent. But like you said, as you've already explained, she does speak with broken English in the film. And also, again, I'm going to go back to the whole comic book superhero thing. The majority of comic book superheroes are, for some reason, considered to speak with an American accent.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that Black Panther, that's really hit the mainstream recently, I'm surprised they even speak with African accents. They actually pulled it off for that movie, and they've made it a part of the character, and it always will be now. But I'm surprised they didn't just say fuck it and say, everybody speak American.
Yes.
Because it's so common with superheroes. So I actually give her a pass now, because originally I was like, okay, she grew up almost her entire life. She was orphaned as a child among, this African tribe. Why doesn't she speak English with an African accent? Because she's a fucking comic book superhero. She gets a pass. So
that's exactly right. And it's all there is to it. I mean, even when she speaks to the tribe, they're talking in English, which is obviously ludicrous. They would not be doing that. No. But the whole point is it's a comic book. This is the whole thing. It's a bit like if we watch The Avengers, we don't watch it for accuracy. We watch it for the excitement, right? It's a comic book. And I think everyone has got to, if they see this movie, or if they haven't seen this movie, or they see it and they think it's a bit silly, they've got to remember, like you said, Velvet, it's a comic book brought to life in the big screen. And you've got to think about it that way. You've got to stop thinking about it like it's just a someone just wrote this movie. This is a comic book being, put on the screen.
Yeah, this is not a biopic.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. Now, we should say that, filming in Africa caused them huge amounts of problems. It made the budget skyrocket out of control with problems that they, just didn't anticipate. They were hit by problem after problem after problem every day. It was not an easy shoot.
Let me pause you there for half a second and pick up right where you were going. I just want to throw this in really quick. For example, like you said, they filmed this on location in Africa. Here are some of the animals they physically had to fly over from Hollywood because they needed trained animals. They couldn't just capture wild animals in Africa. They flew over an elephant, a rhinoceros, 5 lions, 4 leopards, 4 chimpanzees, 5 horses, and 16 birds. Okay, as you were saying. Yes.
So the problems that they face, even to the extent that they had to keep the wild animals either, sort of like chained or caged while they were filming, basically because they were being interfered with by the native animals.
The native animals would attack them or eat them.
Yeah, they had to actually protect them. Yes, just absolutely quite astounding. The problems they had were just, but the fact that they still did it, they actually shot it in Kenya, is, because the thing is, it doesn't matter how hard you try, California does not look like Central Africa. It just doesn't, no matter how hard you try. And so I think they did, an amazing job, with doing that. So you've got to take your hat off to them for that. The other thing too, I was going to bring up is, what did you think of the mercenaries in this? Were they evil enough or too evil?
Oh, God, they're so evil, aren't they? I love mercenaries in any movie because they're the people you love to hate because you're just like, what is wrong with you? Why are you so hateful? Why is your motivation to, just literally, I got paid, gonna go kill? And it's like they don't care about anybody's innocence or whether it's a just killing, if there is such a thing. I have to be careful what I say there. But I'm like, they're so evil in this movie. And that one blonde dude, basically the lead mercenary, he is you just can't wait for him to get it in the end. He is just such a terrible person.
Yes.
He's just ready. He does not care at all. And you're like, really? You have no feelings? Straight on total sociopath. Just got a job to do, going to do it. And you're like, damn.
Yes. They were pretty evil. And the other thing I must say is that towards the end, where we have the final battle, led by Sheena and of course the warriors of the Zambuli, joined by many, many different animals that Sheena has summoned. And we'll talk about the summoning too in a second. Just remind me, Velvet. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yes,
but the final battle. But of course, it's so typical. They fall for the trap that armies throughout history always seem to fall for. Don't drive an armored column down a narrow path surrounded by jungle because you're going to get cut off and you're going to get ambushed and you're going to get destroyed. The Romans learnt that when they invaded Germany. The Soviets learnt that in Afghanistan. But these mercenaries still fall for the same old trap. But the summoning of the animals, Velvet, do you think it was done... because we should explain, if you haven't heard the last podcast or you haven't seen the movie, that she has the ability, Sheena, to summon animals. She has a psychic link, which she has trained and learned while being brought up by the shaman of the tribe. So she can summon animals, communicate with animals. She can work with animals, no matter how vicious or good, sort of thing. What did you think of the way that was done? Do you think it was done well, or was it done a bit too over the top?
No, I think it was also very well communicated in the film because it was really important that they made it clear in the movie that she has this ability. Because if you missed it and she's always putting her fingers up to her head and animals are appearing. You're like, what the hell is going on? So that's honestly one of my favorite scenes of the movie is when she's still a young girl working with the shaman, and she's like practicing summoning animals, and she's just this little girl, and she puts her fingers up to her forehead and closes her eyes, and a little hedgehog comes walking toward her, and they're just like, oh, a little girl summons little creatures.
Yes.
I just think that's so cute. Still my favorite part. So I love that exposition that they show you she has this ability, and it's always very clear throughout the film, and I love that it's unlimited. She can summon birds, she can summon felines, elephants, like all of them. But also, in return for that communication, she will do anything she can to protect them, even if it means giving her own life. So I really do love that this is so well portrayed in the film. I don't think it's over the top at all. This is a humongous movie, humongous undertaking on location. All these exotic animals flown in because they're trained. I think it's done perfectly for this film.
Well, when was it? So, 1984, this movie, because of the extravaganza they tried to turn it into, $25 million it cost. So that's in 1984. The Warriors, as we said, cost, what was it, $5 million? Okay?
Yeah, right.
$4 million or whatever.
God.
Only
Wow.
5 years earlier, all right? However,
Wow.
the return at the box office for Sheena was under $6 million. It was a total flop. A total flop.
Oh, it's such a shame. Such a shame.
A total flop. However, it, of course, along with the comic books, is still part of cult history. And the thing, too, is that it's clearly not disliked that much if there's, apart from this movie, there are 2 television shows there have been of Sheena. So clearly the story does resonate, somehow. But this movie, unfortunately, it didn't with the audience. In fact, it was actually put up, I think, for multiple golden raspberries, of which I think it won pretty much every one it was put up for. So it did not go down well. The critics didn't like it. The audiences didn't really go to see it, which, was a real shame, was a real shame because this movie really was a labor of love, but, at least it lives on, today.
Yeah, absolutely. It is such a shame this movie was such a box office bomb. It's really kind of shocking that, that's the way it goes with this business, though. For some reason, people just don't see certain movies. And I can only imagine now if this type of movie were to be made and it were marketed correctly, this would be a humongous hit, especially with how many people now are avid animal lovers. That would be enough to make people want to go see the movie, just to see all this, what we consider safari animals that we don't get to see over here in the United States.
Yes.
We would love to see this type of movie, I think, now. And also, didn't you mention, not too long ago, there were some murmurings that they are trying to do another Sheena movie, or was it a Sheena TV show?
Well, the information that I can find is really there's not much information.
Murmurings.
There was murmurings that Sci-Fi had bought the rights. Okay.
Oh, wow. Sci-Fi.
Now, the thing about it is that if that was to be translated into a television show, then Sci-Fi would probably do a really amazing job because they make some really good TV. Okay, everyone thinks that everything Sci-Fi does is bloody Sharknado. It's not, so it could be really quite amazing. But then they could go down the path and turn it into a cheesy B grade. I don't know. They may do nothing with it at all. Just because they've got the rights doesn't mean they're necessarily going to turn it into something,
Right.
So, and it's also been almost 8 months, 9 months since the announcement and, or since the news sort of broke, and we've heard really nothing more. So, I really don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful. The idea was meant to be basically that Wonder Woman was so successful that basically maybe Sheena was another comic book we could bring back to life for the modern screen. That was meant to be the idea of it. So the idea where Wonder Woman is fighting for truth and justice, Sheena would be fighting for the environment. And it would be another really interesting concept of a superhero sort of thing. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I've got my fingers crossed, but we'll just, and my toes. We'll just have to wait and see. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, sometimes remakes come out of nowhere, too. It's like sometimes it's so under the radar, and all of a sudden it's just like, coming soon, like next month, this reboot, this re-release. And you're like, dang, I didn't even know they were making one. Like sometimes they keep it really well hidden, and then all of a sudden it just pops up, and you're like, oh, dang, didn't know that happened.
Yeah,
so
I mean, look.
You just never know. Yeah, you never know.
I mean, who knows? We might even, even if they go down the path of a TV show, they might do a pilot, and let's say it never goes any further than the pilot. Well, even if that is the case, I'd still be pretty happy, even just to get another movie, even if it's a TV movie designed as a pilot. I'd still even be pretty happy with that. So we will see what happens. We will see what happens. But
definitely.
Here's another question for you, Velvet, because Sheena's costume has changed dramatically over the years, okay? It originally, in the comic books and in the original TV series, it was really just a leopard skin mini skirt or mini dress, right? Okay?
Right, yeah.
But then as time goes on, it gets skimpier and skimpier and skimpier, okay? To where it is today in 2018, where it is basically just a leopard skin bikini, right? Okay?
Oh my God! Yes.
Now, I would actually think if they do turn this into a movie, they'll probably go back more to what Tanya Roberts wears in this, I think, rather than the modern cartoon. I think the modern cartoon's a bit too saucy. I don't think they'd probably do that. But what I was going to say is, what do you think of Sheena's outfit? Do you because there have been so many different Sheena outfits through the various different incarnations of Sheena. Do you think this was all right? Do you think it went too far, or it was okay, or it was?
I think this was a good choice, and actually, it's rather wise and conscious for the 80s, because I remember Barbie, yes, the Barbie doll. Barbie at one time had something, and I'm trying to look it up online so I can get the title right. It was Animal Lovin' Barbie Safari.
Right.
And she, like all the dolls, were wearing leopard print clothing, and it was like, and I remember the criticism. I mean, even as a child, I remember the criticism of this particular Barbie collection was, okay, if she's a friend of animals, why is she wearing, leopard print? That implies that she's wearing, the skin of the animal, which is not a very friendly way to treat them, because is she killing them just for fashion? Which is, always the argument of, is it okay to wear fur? Is it okay to wear leather? So I like that she's not wearing the leopard print in this, so you don't have to worry about that. Although at the same time, it almost looks like she is wearing leather, but at the same time, she loves animals so much, I know she wouldn't kill them just for, the leather for her clothing. So I do like her outfit in this movie. But it shows a lot of skin. But at the same time, she's coming from what's supposed to be an indigenous culture. We're lucky she's not naked the whole movie, running around topless. I mean,
I don't see that as being lucky. I would have paid extra for that, Velvet. I would have paid extra.
I said lucky. I was like, oh, that's not the right word. No, beautiful woman, but obviously for a mainstream film, we're not going to have her running around topless the entire movie. That would be a different type of movie, which she probably would not star in. And
yes.
I do like what she's wearing in this movie. It's very functional. It's very minimal, and it just has that very stereotypical Hollywood, hey, I'm a jungle girl, this is the type of outfit I'm going to wear.
Yes. Well, there is some nudity in this movie. We do actually get to see Sheena naked for the first time, because we'd never seen her naked in the comic books before. So this was the first time we actually get to see Sheena naked, and the only time, because she doesn't get naked in the comic books even today. The comics do not go down that path. So that was interesting, and I'm sure.
Yeah, Did you ever see a Beastmaster from 1982?
Oh, of course I have. Stars Tanya Roberts. Of course I've seen it.
And she also she also bathes in the nude in that movie too.
Well, it's not the only one. I'll put it to you this way.
No, I didn't say it was the only one. It's just funny because both movies are similar kind of roles. You know, she's a woman dealing with animals, and for some reason in both movies there are sequences of her bathing nude.
Well, it is interesting that I know, you know, because there's Beastmaster and there's also Beastmaster 2. Which doesn't star her, but but what is interesting is that sometimes I've seen Beastmaster and Beastmaster 2, you know, like on the same disc, you know, sold as a double set. But I've also seen Sheena and Beastmaster sold together. So
how funny!
So clearly marketing it on its Tanya Roberts. You know, which is interesting. Gina Lee Nolan in the latter TV series, the 2000 TV series, she would show a lot of skin, but not actually like go nude. But she would say there was a lot of skin. I mean, there were some scenes where she would just be covered in mud, and you see quite a lot. Put it that way, you know. But apart from that, this is really about the only time. Otherwise, generally, Sheena's pretty tame, you know, in that sense. But I think that's maybe more, this was a movie of the 80s, you know?
Definitely.
I think if they did it now, they wouldn't do it, I think.
Right, yeah. The Razzies, the Golden Raspberry Awards for, you know, the bad movies. For some reason, I don't think this is justified at all for this movie. No, it's not a masterpiece. No, it's not the best movie, but I don't think it's a bad movie. The list of the 100 most amusingly bad movies ever made in Golden Raspberry Awards, John Wilson's book, The Official Razzie Movie Guide, this film's listed on there. And I'm like, really? Yeah. I don't think this deserves a Golden Razzie at all. So... interesting Well, the
interesting thing, too, is that the music was written by Richard Hartley, and even the soundtrack got nominated for a Razzie, okay? And to me, I find that really surprising because the soundtrack, to me, sounds very, very similar to the work of Vangelis. Right, you know, so in fact, the opening credits sound very similar to the opening credits of Chariots of Fire. So I was really surprised that he would get nominated for a Razzie. I thought that was just
interesting.
I just think everyone hated it, so they just basically canned it, you know.
Right, and I think that happens with a lot of movies. Sometimes movies are really not that bad, but every single person's going around saying, oh, this movie's so bad. So people just jump on the bandwagon to have something to talk about. Oh, did you see that? Oh, it's so terrible. Oh, it's so bad. And unfortunately, I think this movie's a victim of that camaraderie where it's just kind of like, because we're all guilty of this every once in a while. Like, you'll see a movie and you didn't really like it, but you didn't really dislike it. But then you'll talk to somebody and they'll be like, oh, did you see that? Wasn't it awful? And you'll just instantly chime in, yeah, wasn't it bad? Just because it gives you guys something to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, I don't do that on this show. But every once in a while, just a polite conversation, you'll just be kind of like, oh, yeah, that was terrible. Yeah. And I feel like this movie is a victim of that.
I think it definitely is, and I think it goes back to what you originally said, Velvet, and that is that everybody forgets that this is an interpretation of a comic book, and I think that's where we've said it several times now, but just to reinforce it, I think that's the problem this movie has, is that people either don't realise that or they forget that.
I didn't know this was a comic book until I met you. So I think that just shows you that had they marketed this movie originally and let people know, hey, this is a comic book superheroine and this is why she has magic powers. When you don't have that foundation, you're just like, what a goofy movie. Why does this girl just have these magical powers? Like,
yes.
Once you hear superhero, anything goes. Once you hear comic book character, anything goes. And I don't feel like this movie was marketed with that foundation. And that's why a lot of people are like, what the fuck?
I think you're right. I think the movie was sold as a standover Oh, Standover as a standalone action adventure. Movie rather than this is it's like the way we sell Superman, the way we sell Spider-Man, it wasn't sold the way those movies were. Probably, well, maybe it had a lot to do with the fact that very few people maybe had really heard of Sheena, where everybody knew who Spider-Man, everyone knows who Batman is, so.
Right.
So I think, that was its big problem. Generally speaking, most people that I know who have I've either forced to watch this movie or they have actually seen this movie, they actually come out of it sort of saying, it wasn't that bad. Like even people who would like seriously judge films, not like we do, but they actually seriously judge films. Even so say, now that I've actually seen it in full, there's a lot of faults with it, but, it's not that bad. No, it's not. I really think people have got to give this a try, and it is so easily available, People have really need to, I think give it a try. Just do it for me. Make me happy. Make me happy. Let's get the word of Sheena out there. Let's make Sheena more popular, because the more popular Sheena is, the more chance she'll come back.
Yay. No, this really is such a massive, and I think it's an impressive undertaking. I mean, this movie has tons of aerial shots of the African landscape and seeing the actual wild animals of Africa, and the fact that they shot this on location for 7 months. There was communication problems because they had so many people from different tribes and trying to find an interpreter, and it's really impressive. I mean, even if you don't like the story, I mean, really just the overall filmmaking, it's wow. It's an experience. It really is. I really like this movie.
And the other thing too is that I think also, I really hope that Sheena can be a new icon, for the new age, in the sense that, she is an eco-warrior. She's not there, taking down drug lords, or she's not, building iron suits and flying around. She's fighting for the rights of ecology. And I think that's just something that is, it would just be wonderful to have that sort of superhero, if you like, reemerge, into our culture in the mainstream, not just in the cult side where it is at the moment, but, have that in the mainstream, because, I reckon the more eco-warriors we've got, the better chance we've all got to survive. So, so, and that's the thing, the message this movie tells is a great message, and also an amazing message if you think that this whole concept of this character started in 1937. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
That is.
Sheena predates Wonder Woman. Wow. So, and the fact that in 1937/38, depends a bit on what nation you come from, you've got someone fighting for the environment. Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. That is impressive, definitely.
And I think that's the other thing too, because a lot of people have asked me, I'll just go into a little personal speak here for a moment, why do you love Sheena so much? Why is this, of all the comic book characters, superheroes, whatever, this is the one that speaks to you so loudly, Why is it?
Right.
And it's not, okay, Sheena's beautiful, this, blonde goddess running through Africa. Okay, yes, yes, she's great to look at. But that's not the reason. It's the fact of the message this comic book, then slash TV, then slash movies tells. It's the fact that Sheena fights for something that really no other superhero fights for. And that's, I think, what makes it, to me anyway, so special and what makes it stand out. There you go.
Yeah, I love that she's an eco-warrior. I love that, we all have our mission in life. Like, I've watched documentaries about people who rescue animals. And I remember in one documentary, somebody said to this woman, because her specialty was dogs. I love dogs. I love all animals. But this woman's specialty was that she rescues dogs. And I remember she was saying how somebody asked her, why would you rescue dogs when there's all these people that need help? And I loved her answer. She said, we all have a different calling in life. Like, we're not all going to have the same calling. And I love that Sheena's calling is also animals.
Well, that's exactly right. And the thing is that everything in the planet needs help right now. Not just people. Yes. So too does the wildlife. So too does, I mean, that it's this argument that I always hate. It's like, why did we go to the moon when there were poor people, in the world? Why didn't we spend that money on the poor rather than going to the moon? Well, why can't you do both?
Right.
Is my argument. Maybe if we want to cut down some money somewhere, let's stop killing each other every 5 seconds.
There you go.
And then take but you think about how much money we spend on that every year and start funding that into saving people, into helping people, so, no, we can do it all, and we should be doing much more of it. Anyway, end of political statement. So look, everyone knows how much I love this film. I don't even think there's a need for me to rate it, really. Everybody knows. Right.
Last time you rated it 5 million.
5 million.
So, I don't think that rating's going to change too much.
Well, it could. You never know. You'll have to wait and see. So is there anything else we want to say about, Sheena-Queen of the Jungle before we move on to our final pick for the re-review of this podcast?
There's only one small goof in this movie that I like to point out, is that Bengal tigers are not actually indigenous to Africa. They are indigenous to India. But this is a great movie, and that's okay.
Yes. Also, rhinos don't tend to live in the jungle. They live on the flat plains. So too do lions. They don't live in the jungle, so, there are lots and lots and lots of, faults. The other thing too, that Sheena, of course, traditionally rides a zebra. Although that will obviously change
as Americans say, zebra.
Oh, zebra, yes, zebra. That will, of course, change in the post-thousands, obviously, where the zebra or the zebra will be taken out. But in this movie, of course, it is not the stripy animal; it's the horse. She actually rides a horse, and they basically. Because you can't ride a zebra,
so you can't. No.
So what they actually did was they took a real horse and they just painted it basically
black and white.
Yeah,
because that zebra would have kicked her ass if she tried to ride it. But
it looks good. I mean, I think it does look good. I thought
it was a zebra. I was like, the first time I saw it, I was like, wow. Because when I was a kid, that was like my favorite animal was zebras. I just thought they were the coolest thing on the planet. And seeing her ride a zebra, I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then I start reading the trivia and I'm like, oh, it was a horse. They fooled me. And that was okay.
And not only that, you've got to tip your hat to Tanya Roberts when she's riding that horse. Obviously, it's not a zebra. Riding that horse. No stirrups, no saddle, no reins.
No, bareback.
But no reins, nothing. She is just literally... So she knows how to ride a horse.
Yes. My goodness. Yeah, I would be afraid to ride without a saddle. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to fall off.
Yeah. But not just not saddle, no reins.
No. Oh, my goodness. Wow. It's like, okay, how do we get it to stop?
So either this horse was the best trained horse, ever, or Tanya Roberts is a pretty talented rider. I'm not
always amazed. I'm always amazed that horses let humans ride them. I just think that's fascinating that humans and elephants let people ride them. I'm like, wow, really? You could stomp us. You don't have to let us on your backs. And I think it's just amazing that relationship that we can develop with animals. It's like, wow, it's amazing.
Well, look at humans and dogs. That's probably is there, can you think of any closer relationship there is between two totally different species on the
Right.
planet than there is between humans and dogs. I mean, the
That's
relationship we
fascinating.
have is just it's astounding. Over. What is it? How long do they believe it's been? 5,000 years, 6,000 years, something like that.
Oh, I was surprised not longer. My God. I'm
Yeah.
like thinking millions. I'm thinking like caveman days when dogs were not the dogs we know now. They were some kind of giant saber-toothed wolf.
Well, no, dogs.
I'm exaggerating,
I know.
obviously,
I mean,
but-
modern day dogs basically come from wolves.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
hence why a Labrador can actually breed with a wolf.
Yeah.
But it's
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, but the difference is, but that's the thing about dogs. They're not all different species. They're just different breeds. So
Right.
They're still the same species, So. But that relationship, is amazing. I mean, you think about how that started. It's because it is the word symbiotic. I mean, the fact that it works for both of us so well.
Right,
They get
right.
just as much out of it as we get.
Yeah,
Like
and
it's
I love the theories that they have, that they think the dogs would just hang out around our trash, and then finally we just kept getting closer and closer to each other physically, and it's like,
Yes.
you don't have to eat the trash, I'll give you food. And then the dogs were kind of like, hey, cool, if I hang out with this human, I'll get some food, and in exchange I'll give you some protection because you're my food, so I don't want you to die.
Yeah.
I mean I love it. There's a movie coming out called Alpha that I cannot fucking wait to see, and it's basically that story of there's this tribe of people, and there's wolves, and then somehow like one wolf and one human get separated, and first they're enemies, and then they become friends, and I'm just like, I am going to be crying the entire movie. I'm going to be so touched. I'm just going to love it. I'm going to own it on DVD. It's going to be amazing.
That
I can't
sounds
wait.
amazing. We've got
I can't wait to see it.
We've got to get you to watch another movie too called Oddball. I think you would love that. Absolutely love that. An amazing, actually true story. Actually, a true story about a dog that defends penguins. Absolutely amazing.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah.
I definitely need to watch that.
Yeah,
You sent me
yeah.
the trailer, and I'm like,
Yes.
oh my God.
Yeah,
I need to see that.
Based on, I have to say, based on a true story, there are some things in the movie which are obviously made up for cinematic license. But you'll be amazed, Phil, because at the very end of that movie, when you watch it, you will actually see photos of the real dog, the real farmer, and so forth. It's based on it's actually based it's based on a true story. We don't want to bore people with Oddball. They have no idea what we're talking about. All right, so if we are going to rate Sheena-Queen of the Jungle on the Eric Roberts scale, where are you going to land, Velvet?
Okay, I think I'm rating this one much higher than I did last time, because now I'm giving this movie comic book license, which
Right.
it deserves, which it should have. And I didn't give it that last time because I wasn't quite there yet. I wasn't seeing it as a comic book movie, and now I do. Even though a lot of people don't realize that it is essentially, this is a comic book hero. So she gets comic book license, and because of that license has now been granted by me personally, I am giving this movie 5 Erics.
Oh, I love you, Velvet. I love you. Well, okay, what am I going to do? You said, could I top, what was it, 5 million that I gave
I believe it was 5 million Erics.
5 million. Okay, I'm just going to say this. To infinity and beyond.
Nice.
There we go.
I hope they remake this movie someday, and then you'll have actually something to compare it to, and it's like, wow, okay, I gave the original Sheena to Infinity and Beyond.
know.
What am I going to give this?
And actually, just while we're on the subject of Sheena, I need to give a very quick shout out and thank you, because Iris Stewart and also her husband Tim, who have been obviously who produced the show Legion of Rue. You've heard them on the show several times. And I have to thank both Tim and Irish, because we, as we have discussed before, Irish herself actually worked on the 2000 to 2002 Sheena television series. She was actually part of the crew, and she gave me just before Christmas, or sorry, I really should say Tim, or both of them, gave me a Sheena comic book. It was one of the original jumbo comic books from the 1950s, which is actually signed by Gina Lee Nolan, who played Sheena in 2000 to 2002, and it was signed on set.
Amazing.
And they actually gave it to me. So I just have to say thank you, guys. It was one of the most beautiful presents I've ever got. It meant so much to me. So that's just a bit of a shout out, seeing we are talking about Sheena.
Amazing. So cool.
Oh, so cool. So cool. And we should also say that Legion of Rue, when you are able actually to see all the full episodes, which I think is still maybe a year off or something like that. Was that what Irish was saying last time? I can't quite remember.
I believe so. Yeah,
something like
still,
that. But you are going to see lots of Sheena Easter eggs in it.
Nice.
Because
that's so cool.
because a lot of the sets and even bits of costuming were taken from the 2000 to 2002 Sheena TV show. So you will actually get to see bits of Sheena history in Legion of Rue. So there you go.
Nice.
How cool is that?
That's very cool.
All right. Well, we should probably get a move on and talk about our final revisiting. This is going to be interesting because we'll get to it anyway when we do. But I just sort of thought to really wind off the Sheena discussion, we'll just take a quick break and have a listen to Sheena's song. Yes, the theme from Sheena, Queen of the Jungle.
Nice.
And we are back, and yes, that was the theme to the 1984 movie Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. And this is the thing, every time I hear that piece of music, to me, that's Vangelis, that's Chariots of Fire. So how
Cool.
the hell, Chariots of Fire, one of the most celebrated movies of all time, especially the music. How on earth can you then condemn this piece of music when it sounds very, very similar? It's like it's like that line Jeremy Clarkson once made about Jaguar, where somebody once sort of said, "Oh, it looks too much like an Aston Martin," and he said, "How is that bad? How is that bad?" I mean, it's just like anyway. All right, so moving on now. I'm really glad that we're doing this one. Because this is one of the movies that we did on the very first podcast, Velvet, with yourself. This was actually on the... now, what podcast was this from? This was
episode 12. This was my first time as a guest on this show.
When you were a guest, when you're actually a guest,
I had not seen this movie, and I was like, I'll still hang out for the review. And when you were like, I actually re-listened to it, and it's a lot of fun. It's nice that this time I can actually be like, okay, now I've seen the movie, and I can actually talk about it, because actually right after that appearance and you guys reviewed this movie, I actually did go watch it. So this is my second time watching the movie so that we can review it together. But
fantastic.
I was like, see, I take you guys up on your recommendations as well.
And in fact, and back then, show wasn't even called the Cult Movie Show. It became the Cult Movie Show when you came on board, Velvet, if you remember.
Right. That's right.
We actually changed the name because we had a lineup change, because the show originally was with a gentleman called Gary, who obviously, that's going back a very long time. And Gary left, and you joined, and then we became the dynamic duo that we are today.
So cool.
And interestingly too, I'll just say, from a personal perspective, made one of the best friends I've got, which was it's amazing how the internet can bring people together. Really quite amazing that. So it was wonderful. That was quite a defining moment of my life, Velvet. So
that worked out really well.
I know.
Yeah,
it's it is amazing, So yes, and the show back then was not even. Yeah, as I said, it wasn't called the Cult Movie Show. It was called the Zaius Report. We changed the name, if you remember, Velvet, from the Zaius Report, named after Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes. If anyone wants to know why the hell what's Zaius mean, and we decided that Velvet and I collectively decided we'd rename it into something that somebody understood, because people said, "What the fuck is Zaius?"
I was guilty of this. Out of context, I was like, "Oh, that's right. Yeah, I get it." So that's a cool name, but it's like you have to be like deep in the throes to get it without reference. So
we changed the name. So anyway, the movie that we did. But one of the other movies we did on that podcast, Phil, was we did a movie that you loved.
The other movies we did was The Phantom of the Paradise, also one of my favorite cult movie films. And once you guys said you were going to do that, I was like, oh, well, hey, can I come on and talk about it with you?
Yeah, and it all started from there.
Yeah, and then the other movie you guys did was Barb Wire with Pamela Anderson.
My God, Barb Wire. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I know. Oh, my God. What were we thinking? Anyway, what were we thinking? All right. Anyway, the movie we were talking about, so I don't even think we've said what it is.
Okay. It is Digging Up the Marrow. From, what year is this? 2014.
2014. Written by, and starring Adam Green. And it's a really, really interesting movie because this is a mockumentary. A bit like, we talked a couple of weeks ago, about the mermaids.
Yes.
So this is an actual mockumentary. It has, with the exception of one of the main cast members, the rest of the cast are real people. They're playing themselves.
Yes.
And it's just basically they write themselves into a made-up story. Now, Adam Green, as you know, real film director, film writer and so forth. And he plays himself. So he's not playing somebody else. He's actually playing himself. And the idea is meant to be that he has been contacted by a gentleman called William Decker. And William Decker basically tells him that monsters are real, that they live in underground towns, cities, whatever. They live under the ground anyway.
Right,
And
yes.
what they are is rejected humans with deformities and various different things. And they basically live and run their own culture underground. Now, he's fascinated by this because he's grown up with a love affair of monsters all his life. He makes horror movies, and so forth. So he really, really passionately hopes that this is real, that this guy is not a lunatic, and this is absolutely real. So they decide they're going to make a documentary about it called Digging Up the Marrow. And the marrow is meant to refer to exactly that, the marrow of the inside. So in other words, the monsters live under the earth. So that's referred to as the marrow. So that's how it gets its name, if you're wondering, how the fuck digging up the marrow? What does it have to do with monsters?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's meant to mean.
Right.
Now, William Decker claims to be a retired Boston police officer, although, we'll get to all of this in a minute. And he says that he has discovered this. He's been tracking them all his life. And he has evidence. And so they're going to make a documentary movie together. So they start making their documentary movie. They're not too sure how to take this William Decker. He seems a little bit weird, but, hey, all right, they keep going until they finally have an encounter with what you would call a monster. But they're still not really sure about whether what they've seen is actually real, or maybe it's just one of William's mates who's put on a Halloween mask, in the dark. Is it real? So they keep working with him, and they set up lots of cameras and so forth around there, and they start to get some really weird footage from what is called this entry point to the marrow. In other words, it's meant to be an entry point to the underground society. They start to get some weird things on film. No one really believes them. Even they themselves, even Adam, so desperately wants to believe that this is real, but he's not too sure. They then find out that this William Decker character, not exactly a very truthful guy. His stories are changing. What he tells them, they will often find out isn't true. His history seems very, very weird. And he keeps mentioning, or he does at one stage mention a son who's never brought up again, a wife who is never brought up again. There's something really weird about this character. In the end, after basically almost giving up on William Decker, they sort of decide that they're going to go it alone and see if they can actually get these monsters on footage. They'll give it one last shot and actually see if it's going to work. Well, all hell breaks loose because they quickly find out, holy crap, William Decker was telling the truth. There really are these monsters. They really do live under the ground, and they get attacked by them. The movie will then go even further. William Decker, as I said, we're giving spoilers away because we've already done this movie, okay? William Decker then basically will vanish. No one knows where he is. In fact, people are even saying he never existed in the first place.
Yes.
And then a mysterious camera will turn up at Adam's house one night at the end of the film, where Adam suddenly realizes he cannot continue this project any longer because the monsters know where he lives. What now? We haven't ourselves actually really talked about this movie. It was more, when we originally did it. So this is going to be great. What did you think of Digging Up the Marrow, Velvet?
Wow, this is such an original story, and what's really impressive is that we actually see the monsters. It's not a bunch of off-camera, it's not a bunch of implied, and the use of practical effects in this film, there's almost no CGI. What makes this even more impressive is they actually partnered with an artist named Alex Pardee, and he's known for making these really strange drawings of monsters, essentially. So all the monsters in this movie are based on the drawings of Alex Pardee, and I must say the drawings are horrifying, but the way they actually, with practical effects and a sculptor, create monster replicas of these actual drawings. Oh my God, it is so scary. It is so creepy. And these aren't your stereotypical monsters. You know, this is not the Wolfman and the mummy and a vampire. These are some grotesquely strange, incomprehensible monsters that if you saw this in real life, this would be the absolute definition of monster. This movie has a great mix of mockumentary style as well as humor and comedy, and then they really ramp up the scares with jump scares with these horrific monsters that you're really not sure what you're looking at. Your brain really can't comprehend it on the first viewing. You're just like, oh my God, what was that? That is so scary. And at the same time, there's so many Easter eggs in this movie for horror fans. There are a ton of cameos from actors. Let me take that back. There are tons of cameos from horror actors, horror writers, as well as horror filmmakers. I mean, for example, we see Kane Hodder playing himself. We see Tony Todd, yes, the Candyman, yes, playing himself. We see Don Coscarelli. I mean, there's so many people that you're just like, oh my God, he's in this, he's in this, he's in this too. Lots of great trivia about this film, which I'll bring up later. But one of the things that I love about this movie is I think there was a lot of ad-libbing, which is always great for mockumentary-style films. Also helps add to the humor, because oftentimes it's unintentional humor, and it works. But also one of the great things that Adam Green did as a filmmaker was that only Ray Wise, Adam Green, and the cameraman, Will Barrett, knew the actual story, knew what the movie was about. Everybody else that's in the movie only was given their script. They had no idea what the movie was about. And all in all, this movie took 5 years to make. So it's just, this movie starts off, it's just a great collection of random interviews at different horror conventions, little sound bites from horror actors, horror movie makers, horror writers. And slowly, Adam starts telling the story of what his next movie is going to be about. And so for a minute, you're just kind of like, wow, is this actually a documentary? And then slowly the comedy comes in. You're like, oh, this is going to be a funny movie. But then there's actual scary horror in it. So, yeah, this is a really hidden gem. It is a recent film. It's from 2014. But there's so many horror Easter eggs and so many people that are associated with horror entertainment in it that it makes it an instant cult film that anybody who loves any kind of cult horror film should definitely have this movie in their collection. Wow, let Warren get a word in edgewise.
Well, some of the great things, some of the great things about this, because we have to keep stating it is a mockumentary, right? So
yes, yes.
Which works so well is because Adam Green himself is at all of these conventions, and because all these other directors and actors and so forth are at the conventions, they're actually able to shoot a lot of the dialogue at the conventions.
Yeah.
So it really looks as if they're met at the conventions and they're having a chat. Because obviously Adam Green knows everybody, right? So it's very easy to sort of say, hey, can you just do a quick bit to camera? We'll just talk about this, right? And so it works so well. So it brings a real air of realism, to this, which is what you want in a mockumentary. In a mockumentary, you've got to actually kind of believe that what you're seeing is real. Otherwise, it's just a cheap film. So that's I always thought that's where the original Mermaids wasn't too bad. The second Mermaids was bullshit because it just went down a ridiculous path where it was unbelievable. Right?
I love that. Right. And by the mermaid documentary we're talking about is the one that was released on, was it Animal Planet? Was that the channel?
Yeah, National Geographic or something who made it. Yeah,
it was basically a reputable channel, and it was hilarious that they did this mockumentary about mermaids, and people thought it was real.
Well, I know, it's amazing, but it also wasn't the first time it was done. There was another one that was actually done a few years earlier, which was actually celebrating Apollo 11's landing on the moon. And it was a mockumentary where they came out and they said it was fake. And they had all these American politicians, right, saying, yes, we're going to have to announce it now. It was all staged. We never went to the moon. Not only this, they had fucking Buzz Aldrin there saying, yeah, I never went. It was all filmed in California, right? It's Buzz Aldrin, right? And he's saying, yeah, we shot it on the soundstage, right? And at the very end of the documentary, we just go through, Buzz Aldrin, politicians, all the rest of it, and they all just sit there and go, April Fools. Very, very good. Yeah, but so some documentaries can be really, really good. Some are not so good.
Fantastic.
This one though works really well. I think it works really well. But I have one major criticism of this movie, and that's the casting of William Decker. Now, they cast Ray Wise. Now, everyone knows who Ray Wise is. As soon as you see him...
I love Ray Wise.
Yeah, even if you don't know the name, as soon as you see his face, you're going to recognise him, okay? And that's the problem, because as a mockumentary, as soon as we see Ray Wise playing William Decker, we immediately now know, it's a mockumentary. This is not real, right? It's too much... It's too much of a giveaway, is what I'm trying to say. I think what they should have done is cast a not known actor.
That was the debate when they were making this movie, too. They were debating, should we use a well-known actor or should we use an unknown actor? But he wanted to keep the film in the realm of mockumentary, and that's why he decided to cast Ray Wise, a well-known actor, to keep people rooted. Because he wanted to keep that mockumentary feel. So the moment you see Ray, you remember this is a mockumentary. Right. But at the same time, it's even though we know Ray Wise is not William Decker, we know he's playing a character. This movie still has some very scary moments, and I think that is also because Ray Wise is such a fine actor. I love his performances. He's great at doing over the top, scary, dramatic stuff, and I think he does really well as the paranoid monster hunter, because we don't really know if he's crazy or not. And if they'd taken an unknown, unless they had really good acting ability, it might not have carried the same weight. So I really like the casting of a well-known actor in that role.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Now, the other thing, too, that we should say was, as we said, this is all full of spoilers, this podcast, this episode.
Oh, yeah, this is straight up spoilers. Right. If you want to hear the non-spoiler episode, go all the way back to episode 12.
Yes.
So this is your spoiler warning. I forgot to give the spoiler warning in Sheena, but we actually didn't spoil Sheena too much. So
I think everyone knows by now this is a spoiler episode. So
this is the spoiler episode.
But what we learn as the movie goes on is that why does William Decker have such a... Why is he spending his life around this? Why? Mm-hmm. Well, we get the slow reveal that it's pretty obvious, pretty clear, although it's never actually stated, but pretty clear, that one of the monsters is in fact William Decker's son.
Wow.
And
what's
that's
even
the reason,
worse is we realize he had custody of his son. But by custody, I mean he had his son chained up in the basement shitting on newspapers to keep him home.
Yes.
But he escapes and joins the monsters. It's really horrific, actually. It's really sad. We don't actually ever see his son, or if we do, we don't know it. Because I don't know to what degree, which monster is supposed to be his son. So I don't think we ever find out.
I get the impression that we never do. The monsters that we do see, I don't think any of them are meant to be his son. I actually think that they're, we get to see what is referred to as the gatekeeper, like the entrance guard. We get to see numerous other ones, but I don't think any of them are actually meant to be his son. Because his son, he's trying to keep his son from going down the Marrow. And it's, or is he? Does the son come back to visit and then he chains him up and won't let him go back? And then it's actually very hard to know. I don't really know whether his son lives in the Marrow and comes to visit, or whether he's trying to stop him from going to the Marrow. Because we do see a scene where he interacts down this entrance hole, and he's clearly trying to feed somebody. And it would suggest that that's his son that he's feeding. But at the same time, we sort of know that his son's chained up. So has his son escaped? We really don't know. That's never really fully explained.
Exactly. There's quite a few aspects to this movie that leave questions unanswered, and I like that about this movie, because sometimes you ask those questions that never get answered in a movie, and it's very frustrating, and it leads to a very unsatisfactory viewing experience. Whereas with this movie, it really works, because it makes you ponder, but it doesn't leave you frustrated. So I love that we know there's something going on with his son. We figure out most likely his son is a monster, but we don't know how old he is. We don't know how long he was most likely held captive. We don't know how recently he escaped. We don't know if he's been to the monster world before and he came back to visit. There's a lot of great questions that we don't get a definitive answer to. And I think that also makes this movie viewable. You can rewatch it again. It gives it a nice high rewatch value.
Yes, it does. Now, what about the other element which is always essential to any sort of horror-based movie? Jump scares.
Oh my God.
You can't have a horror movie without a few jump scares. Now,
oh my goodness.
Do you think they were done well? What did you think of the jump scares in this?
Yes, they got me again in this one. Even though I'd seen it before, every time those monsters jump out, I'm like, ugh. And then I always kind of laugh because they look so crazy, but it's so scary at the same time. You just don't know what you're looking at. And you're like, oh my fucking God, what is that?
Yes, they've done. You said this earlier, Velvet. The monsters are not really what you expect to see. They're
they are monsters.
Yeah, because they're monsters in the sense of what. Oh, now to be careful how I say this. What used to be referred to as freaks.
Yeah. But beyond that, because I guess, I agree with you. I'm treading carefully too, but let's say severe deformities. I mean, Elephant Man style, but also worse, because in this movie, there's just some weird looking shit. It's just that they are beyond humanoid. They're definitely humanoid, but they don't look at all like humans. They don't even look like most of them don't even look like deformed humans. They straight up look like monsters. They don't even look like they're the same species as we are. So very scary, very strange.
That is to a degree kind of examined, because William Decker makes the claim that he believes that there are these Marrow entrances all over the world. Okay, they're everywhere, and that there are. What is actually going on underground is that they're not just caves with a few monsters living in. This is an entire society with cities, laws, customs. And it is an entire society that lives underground. He talks about the fact that they probably have marriages, divorces, that they even have a legal system. You know, it's it's a fully incorporated society. And he also believes that every hole matches up with another hole. In other words, they're nothing more than concealed entrance and exit points. If you actually were to go down, yes, you would find an actual city, right? Now, I kind of find that a little bit ludicrous, that whole idea, because how would you build a city without any industry, without any, right? I mean, I think that's more the imagination of William Decker rather than probably the reality of what is actually going on underground. I actually think that they are societies, but they're not living in friggin' cities underground. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think,
my question,
you know,
my question is, okay, if they're living underground, why do they come up? Why do they come out at night?
Because they like pancakes. In fact, that's even one of the reasons which is given. That's even one of the reasons which is given, which kind of sounds stupid, but because it goes totally against everything William Decker has said. Because if he's saying there's entire societies down underground, they can make their own pancakes. Why do they need to come up?
So that was my. So when he said that, that made me think. Okay, maybe if I don't take that answer literally, maybe in other words, that are coming up for supplies.
I think that's right. Yes, I think you're right.
Is that it?
Yes, I think you're right, Thor. I'm just having a bit of fun. I think you're right.
No,
yes.
no, that was very funny.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's funny in the movie. It's funny when you say it's a funny line. It's
yeah.
But he also makes another great point. Just like amongst humans, we have nice people and we have evil people that do horrible things. There are monsters that live up to the definition of monster. There are some that come up to commit murder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the whole idea is meant to be that they're no different to us in a sense that there are meant to be good ones and bad ones, the same as humans.
Yes.
There are good ones and there are bad ones, and they're no different. They're no different. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's intriguing about that is, well, how do you know what's a good monster and what's a bad monster? Because you can't tell by looking at them, just like with humans. You can't tell until the deed has been done, whether it's a good deed or an evil deed.
Well, that's exactly right. Does a serial killer look like a serial killer? Well, obviously not. Otherwise, they'd all be taught before they started, you know. So it's the same with the monsters. Just because somebody scares you because of the way they look doesn't actually mean they're evil. They could be a good monster. So, it's very, very interesting the way all of that is, you know, is done. It's a really interesting little film. It's definitely one for the real. I would almost say this is a movie for the horror buffs that want something that's a bit different and a bit of fun and a bit more lighthearted.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of great stuff about this film. I actually want to see this movie again, actually recently, like super soon, want to watch it again, because I found out that this movie evidently has a lot of Easter eggs in the background that you do not catch on the first viewing.
Okay.
And I'm like, really? And so, for example, here's, again, this is a spoiler review, but this is something you can watch out for when you're watching it. I want to watch it again to see this part. So evidently, and I want to see if you caught this, Warren, because I didn't. So there's a bunch of stuff like this in the movie that I did not know. For example, there is a scene where, you know, Adam Green and his cameraman are in the editing bay and they're talking. And so, you know, on the editing bay, sometimes there's going to be like a screenshot or a still shot of whatever it is, whatever video they're currently editing, right? So Adam Green and his camera guy are having a conversation and we see a tombstone on one of the screens. And as they're talking, if you pay attention, you will actually see on the monitor behind Adam Green, the creature is camouflaged as one of the cemetery headstones, and he slowly stands up at one point and walks out of the cemetery, and nobody sees. Yes. So, yeah, I was like, shut up. So, they're saying there's a lot of these are purposely subtle hidden moments in the film, and you only notice them upon repeat viewings. And I was just like, I cannot wait to see this. So, and Adam Green says this film was designed to offer new surprises whenever audiences rewatch it and look more closely. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'm watching this again this week, and I'm going to be all about the background.
Wow,
I love that kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff.
That's really cool when they do things like that. That's really, really cool.
So now I've seen this movie twice and I didn't notice any of that stuff, but now I'm going to be looking for it. Did you see anything like that?
No, I didn't. But then again, I wasn't really looking.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I'm saying.
You know,
that's great filmmaking right there. And again, it adds to the replay value because you're like, oh my gosh, I have to watch this again because I didn't see everything that I thought I did.
That's
so I'm really
very cool.
Excited. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So
that's very, very cool. No, go on.
Yeah, and another thing about the story behind this movie was Adam Green. Some of you may be like, why does that name sound familiar? If you're familiar with the Hatchet franchise, yeah, that's his baby, the Hatchet axe murderer in that movie. Or I should say Hatchet murder. Anyways, all these, Adam Green goes to all these horror conventions all the time, and he actually received a package in the movie similar to the one, or in real life, similar to the one that he received in the movie, where a fan was saying that his character Hatchet from, his horror movie is real, and he had proof, and he actually had drawings, he had maps, he had all this crazy stuff. And so Adam didn't do what he does in the movie. He did not decide to contact this man and, hey, show me where Hatchet lives. Let's not do that, because this dude's probably not mentally sane. But it got that beat, it got his brain buzzing, and that's what led to the creation of this film.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story, Velvet. That's a really interesting story.
Yeah.
That there's realism
there's a lot of crazy people out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crazy people out here.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing too that's interesting about this movie is that for the first time I think I've seen in a horror movie anyway, is a kind of explanation to why people like horror. Like, just, quite often, I've often heard people, make comments that's like, I do not understand why people like horror movies. Why can they enjoy that? It doesn't make any sense. And in this movie, there's some really good explanations from various different interviews of real people, actually explaining to you why they either like horror or got into the horror genre, whether it be writing or acting or whatever. And that's really a fascinating bit about this movie in itself. Some of the real interviews in this, they're actually really interesting just to see in their own right.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the interviews is with the actual artist that all the monsters are based on, with Alex Pardee. And it's interesting to hear about him talking about his creative process and inspiration for these monsters was due to an illness he was going through.
Yes.
And it's not funny when he's describing it. It sounds actually really horrific, but creativity breeds in strange grounds sometimes, and he's a great example of that. But I love that he's in this movie. Yeah, I love that he's in this movie, and that he actually provided, the foundation for the monsters in this film, because they are so creative, so crazy, so scary looking. And you're just like, wow, this is some messed up shit. It's
really well done, because obviously, you've almost got a, because of course with a lot of the filmmaking, because it's meant to be, as we said, mockumentary, so it's meant to be copying obviously a documentary style. So we get a lot of that, POV filming. Where it's actually shot from the camera person's perspective.
Yes.
But one thing I will say about that, because I know this is one thing that turns a lot of people off found footage, is shaky cam. People, they say gives them headaches and all sorts of things. No shaky cam. So you don't have to worry about that. It's actually done really well. In the bits which are done like that, there's no shaky cam. So thumbs up to that. It's good.
Definitely.
Well made. Yeah. Well made.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's interesting, because there's a lot in this movie that, for a minute, it's very mockumentary. For a minute, it's very almost found footage. But then you do have those camera angles where it's like, okay, the only way we would be able to film the cameraman filming is if there's another person there.
Yes, that's right.
And that brings it back to movie level. So I do like that they have that stuff in there. They have Ray Wise in there to ground you again, remind you, this is not real. This is a mockumentary. And then when it starts looking like found footage, it starts looking like mockumentary. They have somebody shooting the cameraman with a camera that is not a part of the actual story going on. And you're like, okay, again, this is a movie.
Yeah.
So I like that it's weird how they made these choices to keep the film grounded in realism, while at the same time being a mockumentary and being a horror film, and also all the comedy that's in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a really interesting mix of those genres, and I think this works so well. It's such a unique story. And just the monsters. I can't get over the monsters. Love, love, love the monsters. Not love as in, I think they're cute. No, they're scary as hell. But just the concept is so well done. I love that they did not go with traditional monsters. I love it that they went with this artist vision and actually let him help to create that for this movie. Just so cool.
Yeah. It's a great little film. Really interesting. Really do recommend people check this out. The other thing too is that, I suppose, and here we come for the major spoiler, What did you think of the ending? Do you think it was well done, left a bit to be desired? What were your thoughts?
Here's the thing. I like the ending, but I don't like the exact way the movie ends. And I had this problem the first time, and I thought this was just maybe, honestly, I thought the first time I saw the movie that the copy I had messed up or something, because I watched it digitally. So this time I watched it digitally again through a different service, and the ending is the exact same. And I was waiting for credits to roll, and the credits rolled, and I'm like, oh, okay, that is it. The way this movie ends is we have Adam Green touching base with the audience, talking into the camera, and he's saying, I'm discontinuing this project because this camera disappeared and the camera reappeared, and I'm going to show you what was on the camera. And so we see that Ray Wise, or William Decker, our paranoid monster hunter, has been captured by the monsters. He's naked in a cage, and they're forcing him to say into a camera that monsters do not exist.
Yeah, I know.
So
Yeah.
You're just like, it's actually scary. It's funny when we're talking about it, but it's actually really scary when you watch the movie. But then we see a POV shot of somebody carrying this camera, and you realize they are walking up to Adam's house at night. Adam Green, the director, they're walking up to his house at night. They manage to sneak in. They go into Adam's bedroom where he is sleeping, and they act like they're going to touch his face, but then they set down the camera with a roar, and he jumps awake. And then end credits roll. And I'm like, oh, that is how the movie ends. Okay, it's like, I get it, but both times I thought that a scene was missing or something. It's like, it's supposed to be a jump scare ending, but for some reason,
Yeah.
I'm expecting him to come back after that and be like, and that's why I am not fucking chasing monsters, no
Yeah.
bow.
Yeah. The confession of William Decker is really, really, or the staged confession is really, really interesting, because it is so much like those confessions that I don't know if you remember, I remember during the Gulf War, and there were all those American and British and Saudi pilots who had been shot down, and they were in prison camps by the Iraqis, and they were doing these, forced confessions where they were sort of saying, the Iraqi people are good people. They do not want this war. I totally believe that we should not be fighting this war. We are bad. Britain is bad. America is bad, right? And in the meantime, their faces are black and blue. They've got puffy eyes. They've been tortured, had the shit beaten out of them. And somehow or other, you're expected to believe that's a real confession, right?
Right.
And this movie, it's a bit like that, because you've got a naked man in a cage. The cage is being shaken by a monster, and he's saying, monsters don't exist. They're not real. They're not real. It's like... But
again, it's not funny when you watch the movie, but when we say it, it's funny for some reason.
But that's the thing. See, when I first saw it, I sort of thought, oh, it's so stupid, it's so unrealistic, because how would the monsters seriously think that anyone's going to believe him? But then I remembered, it suddenly dawned back on me about that footage of those guys from the Gulf War, and I realised, you know what? We actually do that for real. We actually put up stupid stage statements and expect people to believe that they're true. So,
but that's also the monster's way of saying, don't fuck with us.
Well, basically, yes. Yes.
Don't fuck with us. Don't come looking for us. Don't film us, is really what it's saying. And so I think it's a great scene. Ray Wise, that's an actor with balls. He's not afraid to get naked and sweaty and dirty for a movie. So I respect that, because that did not look like very comfortable filming conditions at all. It really did look like they were under the fucking ground, and there's like roots and dirt hanging down, and it just looks so realistic and just so uncomfortable. But that scene where just like the monster sneaks into Adam's house and like lays the camera on the pillow and like roars, and you see Adam like jump awake, and then it's like black screen, credits roll. I'm like, wait, what? Oh, okay, I get it. That's what's on the camera. That's why you're not going to pursue the project. It was just kind of weird, because it's so fucking abrupt all of a sudden, that this whole movie, I'm entertained, I'm laughing, now I'm intrigued, now I've had some jump scares, and all of a sudden there's just that end. It's that just abrupt end. Yeah. And it leaves you feeling a little you almost feel like you don't have closure. It's one of those movies where all of a sudden you don't feel like you got a complete ending to a film. You don't feel like you got closure. So I still like the movie a lot, but that ending, it makes me feel unsettled, which again is honestly a sign of good filmmaking, good story writing, because it elicits an emotion. It's not a movie I forget. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. I mean, I think you nailed it on the head, actually. I 100% agree with you. Yeah, totally. Totally.
Thanks.
So, all right, if we're going to rate this one, because, and here's the interesting bit, back in the days of the Zayas report, we didn't rate them. We just gave them a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So we didn't actually have the Eric Roberts scale of measurement back then. So we're going to actually have to rate this one for the first time.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, okay, on our scale of 1 to 5 Eric Roberts, because this movie, I like it the whole time, I'm enjoying it the whole time, I'm intrigued the whole time, and then that fucking ending leaves me so unsettled. I don't want to take off points because of that, but I'm still going to, because this movie makes me feel so unsettled at that ending. I'm not traumatized. I go about my day and I'm fine, but it's just for a moment, you're just like, oh, what happened? Oh my God, what the fuck? Like, is there something wrong with the disc? I mean, is that how the movie ends? Oh, credits are rolling. Okay, that was it. Like, it's that ending fucks me up so bad that I'm just like, instead, if I don't know, if they'd ended it somehow different, it doesn't have to be a happy ending. But yeah, that ending, some reason, I'm not saying it's a bad ending. It's not a bad ending, but the way it makes me feel, I cannot give it 5 Erics, but I am going to give it 4.5.
Okay. I'm really kind of not sure how I feel about this film. I like it.
I can understand that.
I really like it, but I do actually also believe that if you're not a bit of a fan of horror, this is maybe a bit of a, not hard to watch because it's way, way scary or anything like that, although it does have some great jump scares in it, like we said. But,
yeah, it does. Oh my God, yeah.
But it's just, I don't know, I think this is for the fan. Do you know, this is a fan movie.
It definitely is.
To a degree. And I think if you're not a fan of the genre, then you're not going to get the full potential out of this movie. So
exactly, yes, that's true.
And I think that's the thing. So for me, because it's like I quite like horror, but horror's not my absolute dead favorite, of all types of genres of ever, of movie making. So I'm going to give it 3.5. I still think it's good, but I just don't think it's brilliant.
I can understand. No, I can understand that totally. No, I have to agree with you. On my rating, I'm such a fan of horror that resonates with me, and I recognize the people. But no, you're totally right. If I didn't have that resonance, if I wasn't a fan of horror, I wouldn't be able to rate it as highly as I do. I have to agree with you on that.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Yeah. Like for someone who's not really a fan, it's going to be like, well, who's that? Who's that? Who's
exactly.
that? Who's that?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like cameos in movies. If you don't know who the actor is, the cameo's pointless,
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. No. But I still liked it, and I still recommend it. I definitely recommend it to people. But yeah. No. But it's still a good film. I liked it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. So no mini movie this week. We will return with a mini movie review next week. I honestly forgot.
That's all right. We would have run way over time actually.
Yeah, I know.
If we
but
had
also in the end that worked out better because I even thought, I was like, I have a feeling we're going to run so fucking long that it's actually good I forgot the mini movie because it would end up being a 4-hour podcast.
I know. Yes, I know. I think it worked out better actually. So yeah, I think because of what we did this week, a reviewing, and because we were going to give the endings away and discuss the endings and things like that, we knew that this was going to be a long show. So it worked out fine.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, worked out fine. All right, so. Anything we want to say? Anything we want to, any housekeeping or anything like that?
Just the usual. Just follow us on Twitter at Cult Movie Show. And yeah, that is pretty much it for now.
Cool. All right. So we'll be back next week.
Woohoo.
And with 69, I think, next week. No, this was 69.
Actually,
Sorry.
70. Holy
we'll
cow,
be back with 70. Wow.
Whee!
Wow.
Very
So
cool.
6 more to go, and we're at 3/4 of a century. Wow.
Nice.
I was about to say quarter of a century, but then again, my maths was so bad when we were doing the Warriors that, you know, I'll just make
I
up
should have
numbers.
known that too. Don't feel bad. I mean, I was born in 1980, so I should have known. I'm like,
I mean,
I don't
it's
know
like-
how old that movie is.
But I mean, it's like Warren. It's not hard maths. It's 2018 minus
I can't do
1979.
mental math. I'm just like,
and I'm going, oh, it's
I'm
4
like-
years. It's 14 years. It's 18 years. It's 39 years.
I came for the movie, not the math.
Yeah. Good one. I'll pay that. Good one. Oh, dearie me.
All right, excellent.
All
I'm
right.
so happy to have you in my life as my friend and my co-host on this show. I'm so glad we got to revisit these shows. I would love to do an episode like this again, another year from now, when we're like, whoa,
yeah.
we got a couple movies that we didn't do justice to. We got to revisit. I think this was a great idea, and I'm so glad you came up with it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that, and that's the other thing too. I mean, it's like as we said, the podcast from
Episode 12.
Episode 12, you know, from Digging Up the Marrow was when Velvet and
Yeah.
I first met. So it's kind of quite important, you know. So it's it's very, very cool, and that was number 12, and we're now at number friggin' 69. Jesus.
Oh, had to say it. We didn't do it like that one time. We got to say it like that one time. 69.
69! Woo!
All right, so yeah.
Cool.
Got to say it like that one time for the immature teenagers that are listening to our show.
So look, we'll be back next week, and we'll be back to the normal format, as Velvet said. We'll have a mini movie, and we'll be back to talking about cult movies that when we won't give away the endings. So this was just a bit of a one-off. So, all right. So thanks for listening, guys. We don't know what we're going to do next week. We haven't decided yet. We'll decide
Not
that
yet,
during the week. But it'll be the same sort of lunacy that we normally do. Actually, we're a bit more serious this show, I think. I don't know.
It depends on the movies.
Yeah.
It depends on the movies. Because when they're so bad they're good, then of course it's nothing but lunacy.
Yeah.
But then when there's horror movies, if it's a good horror movie, it's going to be more serious. If it's a shitty, stupid horror movie, then it'll be more lunacy. It just depends on the movie. You never know what you're going to get until you watch the movie.
Like Star Crash. Oh my god!
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. Oh god! It's just going to go down in my psyche forever. Star Crash.
Oh
Yeah.
my god!
I swear on my tombstone it will say his life was a star crash.
Oh my god! And there will be the officiant, the one that's presiding over your funeral. It will be a robot with a southern accent.
Yes, I want that. I want that, Velvet.
Oh my
I want
God.
that.
That is the way you go out.
I want a robot with a southern accent. That's what I want. That's what I want.
That was amazing. So amazing.
Oh, dearie me. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for listening. As we said, we'll be back next week. We will leave you, as we always do, with the amazing and charming Alana Evans and perfect.
Whoop,
and
whoop.
we don't say thank you enough to Alana for letting us, for actually
Right.
supplying us with the theme to this show. So we
definitely.
we have to actually say thank you, because it was very kind. She didn't have to do that, and she did. So it's very, very kind. That's about it.
Yeah, good shit. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week. Whee!
Cheers, guys.